for a presentation regarding the turnaround academies in the Indianapolis Public Schools. Thank you.
You weren't the fullback. You didn't run through it.
All right, Tamara, we're ready.
All right. Good afternoon, Superintendent Ritz and fellow board members. Thank you for allowing me to provide you all with an update on the progress of the turnaround academies, as well as allowing Naomi Sesqueres from Pensaris Education Solutions, and she represents the consulting group that came in and did an external evaluation of core question 4 of the performance framework. So she'll be presenting her findings, and I believe you all received the executive summary, which is a synopsis of some of the things that she saw at the schools. So first, I'd like to briefly review our oversight process, which I've shared with the board on previous occasions. So our oversight process, as you all know, includes monitoring, which involves weekly site visits, the collection of data to analyze trends and see what exactly is occurring at the school, and then the reporting of that information to key stakeholders such as yourself. And we also use a variety of tools to do that. Our performance framework, of course, the state board monthly report that you all receive, and the master calendar of reporting requirements are just a few examples. So now I'd like to discuss the State Board of Education monthly template that you all receive. So this is just an example of Emmerich Manual's template that we use on a monthly basis. And one thing I want to point out is this is not part of the current template, but I wanted the board to be able to see how each indicator correlates to a specific core question in the framework. And that's the way in which we developed the report so that you can see a clear alignment. But when we look at this report, we're able to see trends. So we can see that, for example, they had 79% student attendance for 2 months, and then they jumped to 88%. So the way that the template is structured, it allows for the school leaders to put comments as to why maybe some of those attendance percentages or issues are the way that they are. So you can see that they report on if there are any dropouts, any tardies, any withdrawals. And then I think the important category is the next step. So if we're seeing an increase in attendance, I want to know exactly what it is you're doing and how you plan to continue to increase attendance. Now, if we see the opposite and we see the attendance rate declining, I'd like to know what you have in place to change that, to make the attendance rate increase. So for an example, they included the fact that the task force will continue to evaluate attendance each day, making calls at 10:30 to report absences. They have a task force. So the way the template is structured, it allows for the schools to not only analyze exactly what's going on, but to also think about next steps and how they're going to proceed forward in the future to ensure that they're successful. So this is a revised version of the template. So when we first created the template, we used the template that the previous turnaround division had created, and it was a great foundation. And then I constructed the template that you just saw and shared that information with the outreach division, and they added a few things. And after reviewing the template that Edison Learn created, I saw some really positive things that they included that we didn't have in our template. So what I went and did is added some of that information into our template to make it a more comprehensive document. So some of the changes include adding the actual school goals. And this is an example of Arlington's template. So you'll see Arlington's individual school goals for 2013-14. We also added, as I said before, the core questions that align with the actual indicators on the performance framework. And then it's not reflected here, but we also added the additional goals that don't necessarily align with an indicator, but allow the schools to share with the state board how they're progressing to those goals. So credit matriculation or college and career readiness may be a goal that's not necessarily reflected in an indicator, but we're going to include that in the template so that you all can see how they're progressing to those goals. So now I want to talk about the performance framework that we use to assess school performance. So we'll start with Emma Donnan. So what we did is we took 2012-13 data when the schools were not under our purview, and we plugged that information into our performance framework so we could see where they would have landed if they had been using the framework. So as you can see, core questions 1.1, 1.2, and 1.5, the schools would have not been meeting standard. 1.3, 1.6, and 1.7 would have not been applicable, and then the data to calculate core question 1.4 comes from real-time reports, and that information was not available to us, but that's something that will be calculated for 2013-14. So what you're looking at now for Emma Donnan is a current reflection of quarter 2 information. So as I explained to the board previously, we assess the schools every quarter to see how they're performing against core questions 2 and 3. So this represents Emma Donnan's performance for quarter 2, which would have been October through December. In terms of core question 2, we didn't have all of the information available, but we were able to assess their performance on SIG funding. And we actually get that information from the outreach division. Cindy Hurst provides that information for us. So as you can see, Emma Donnan was meeting standard in terms of their SIG funding requirements. They were also meeting standard for all of the indicators for core question 3 for the second quarter. So now we have manual, and this is representative of the 2012-13 data again. And you can see that with core questions 1.1, 1.3, 1.5, and 1.6, they would have not been meeting standard on our framework. And 1.2 and 1.7 would not be applicable. And then once again, 1.4, the data was not available to calculate that indicator. Then if we look at core question 2 for manual, they were meeting standard on their SIG funding requirements, and they were also meeting standard for all of the indicators for core question 3. For TC Howell, for the 2012-13 data in our framework, they would not be meeting standard on 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.5, and 1.6. 1.7 would not be applicable, and once again, 1.4, the data was not available to calculate that indicator. For core question 2, they were meeting standard in terms of SIG funding, and then for core question 3, they were meeting standard on 3.2 and 3.3. They were approaching standard on 3.1, which means that there were minimal concerns, and those concerns were around communication between leadership, just some issues as far as compliance reporting, but that's something that we've discussed with them and something that I see progress in that area. Okay, for Arlington High School, they would have not been meeting standard on 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.5, 1.6. 1.7 would not be applicable, and then once again 1.4, the data was not available to calculate that indicator. And then for core question 2, meeting standard on the SIG funding, they were meeting standard on 3.1 and 3.3, and then approaching standard on 3.2, which was because there were minimal concerns, and that was around compliance documentation and the submission of that information. So when we look at the turnaround academies and their progress thus far, and Naomi will get into more detail regarding her evaluation of the schools, there are 7 turnaround principles, and obviously there are 8 things here, but I think when we look at areas of strength, in terms of strong leadership, I'd like to use Emma Donnan as an example. I think Emma Donnan's principal and their assistant principal work really well together and have a lot of buy-in from the staff and support, which is really critical. So I think that school is an example of strong leadership that I've seen since we became the oversight authority. In terms of the use of data for continuous improvement, I think both Manual and Howe have been utilizing data to continue to improve and look at areas in which they can maybe redesign some things or change some things. So I think they've been doing a good job in that area. And then in terms of redesigning the school day, week, or year, I think Arlington has done an excellent job in that area, in that they've extended the day which allows them to do mentoring and tutoring and for children to have assistance in doing homework. So I think they've done a good job there. In terms of the areas for growth, I think family and community engagement is always an area for growth. When you look at the turnaround principles, that's something that has to be continuous. It can't just be sporadic. I do want to say that CSUSA has made some great strides in that area in reaching out to groups like the Southeast Education Task Force, which is a community group that's very engaged and cares very deeply about what's going on the South Side. So they've made some progress in that area, but I think that's an area that all of the schools can continue to grow in. As well as school climate and culture. There's been great improvement from before the takeover to now, but I think that's an area that also could grow. Teaching and instruction as well, rigorous and differentiated instruction. And I think the biggest thing is student engagement. And I think when Carrie Wicker came to Emma Donnan, that was something that she commented on. I think increasing attendance rates are great, getting kids in seats are great, but we have to get students engaged and excited, not only about being at school, but about what's next and what's possible. So I think that's really the next step, making sure that we are keeping these kids engaged and excited about the possibilities and making sure that they know that there's anything that they can do as long as they work hard. So I think student engagement is not necessarily a turnaround principle. It's part of the other principles, but something that has to be kept in mind when we're thinking about the success of these schools. Now, in terms of our future oversight, we're going to continue our site visits. I do weekly check-ins with the operators. We have monthly compliance meetings in which we review that template that I showed you and have discussions as to how we can improve our quarterly assessments, and then continuing to work with key stakeholders. I've had a really positive working relationship with the Assistant Superintendent of Outreach, Teresa Brown, and also Maggie Pano in terms of answering questions, because we oversee an existing operational contract between the department and the operators. So it's very important that we communicate with the DOE and that we align, and I think that working relationship has been very, very positive, and I think also extremely helpful in allowing me to do the job of oversight. So in terms of next steps, we requested that the schools complete financial audits. That was not a requirement, but I think in an effort to be transparent, we wanted to be able to share that information and see how the schools were doing financially, the operators were doing financially. So we anticipate getting that information in March and being able to share that information with the board. Scheduled to present in April for Q3. And then the last thing is Indiana Code requires a public meeting, a joint meeting between the school corporation, IPS, and the operators. It's supposed to occur 2 times a year. It didn't happen last year, and I believe that was because of some transitions. I have spoken with the DOE and the operators as well, and IPS, and we're hoping to have that joint public meeting. We probably will only be able to do one, but we're hoping to have that happen towards the end of the year, because I think that's another important piece of transparency and letting the public have the opportunity to ask questions and to know what's going on with the school. So that's something that we need to have happen. So are there any questions? Yes.
Tamara, one of the things, and some of us have been through this whole journey with consultants and eventually decided to take the action that we put them in schools under new supervision. There was always a thought that the key would be communication and efficient, accurate, clear information flowing. It was going to be directly to us, but now we have the mayor's office, thankfully, for your work. Are you finding the information flow is accurate, timely, responsive? Because a lot of these charts are great, but there's a lot of information packed to get
Absolutely.
this. So how is that working? And of course, I was pleased with the reports, by the way. Thank you for organizing.
You're welcome.
So how's the communication, information sharing going?
I think with the introduction of any new system or process, challenges are to be expected, and there are going to be gaps that you hope will dissipate as time goes on. But I will say there have been challenges in getting the information, whether that's in a timely manner or in the correct format that we need to provide the board with the information. And I also think the Department of Education has had some challenges in getting the reporting requirements completed from the operators, and I think that's something that they're probably best positioned to address. We've had conversations, and I hope that we will progress forward, but there have been some challenges in getting information that's needed.
Brad?
We had, Gordon and I had an opportunity to visit, was it Emadonna that we were at? And I guess one of the things that's been in the back of my mind since that visit, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. How do we help the operators with issues when we're seeing a 7-8 school where half the population turns over every year, and then we're hearing from them that they can't get the cooperation they need to address some of the more kind of systemic issues created by the feeder system, needing to be able to really get to the students when they're much younger. And maybe our plates are full, but at some point, I'd love to just hear you comment about, does it make sense really to try and change the culture of a 7-8 school without thinking about all the feeder pieces to that, or is that, would you encourage the board to look at that? Because honestly, I'll be honest with you, not that I want to see another subcommittee right away, but I just wondered, do we need to study that and understand it? Because if we're going to invest and we really want to make a difference in their lives, I walked away from there feeling like if I was a school operator, I would be like, for as much growth and great things are happening, it still seemed to me like that was a missing piece, that maybe we're treating symptoms and not the root problem. And I want to make sure we fundamentally change the root problem. Does that make sense?
That does make sense, and I absolutely agree with you. That's something that's an issue when you have 7th and 8th grade and you have a turnover. I do think that you have to look at the feeder system and you have to analyze to see what is contributing to some of the challenges and the issues that Emma Donnan is facing. So it's something that I do think needs to be looked at and studied so that we can figure out how Emma Donnan can deal with that turnover, because that's very challenging when you have kids coming in several grade levels behind, and you only have 2 years to turn it around. That's very, very challenging. So I think you have to look at the feeder schools and see exactly what's happening and look to see if there are any best practices that could be put into place to help get those kids up to speed as quickly as possible. So it's something that definitely needs to be looked at.
So are you having conversation with Dr. Farabee regarding that?
I have not engaged in any conversations yet with Dr. Farabee, but that's something that I've had discussions with Emma Donnan about in terms of the struggles and the challenges that they're facing. And I think that the deputy mayor has worked hard to build a good relationship with Dr. Farabee, so I anticipate those conversations occurring in the future, and I think they're absolutely necessary.
Any other comments? Yeah, Tony?
Has your office's analysis of the data suggested whether or not these schools have improved, stayed the same, or gotten worse?
I think in looking at the data at a high level, we're currently waiting for acuity information so that we can assess how the schools are doing this year. I think when we look at it at a high level, I think we are seeing improvements. I think that once the data comes out, that will tell the story. But I do think we have seen improvements. Now, whether we're going to see significant improvements at the end, I can't say. But I do think the schools have made progress. And I think we also need to keep in mind that we are midway through, or a little bit more than midway through, the second year of this process. 11-12 was an observation year, a planning year, and then they had 12-13, and now this year. So I think we have to understand, when you look at turnaround research, it can take 3 to 5 years to actually see improvement. So keeping that in mind, I do think the schools have progressed, and I think once that data comes out at the end of the year, we'll be able to tell whether or not we're headed in the right direction, but progress has occurred.
Dan?
When I see when you say progress, and it looks like organization, safety, leadership, there's some fundamentals in place.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that does give you confidence, because a lot of us visited these schools beforehand, and that was critical element, foundational element to get the achievement, right?
Absolutely, and when you look at turnaround research, you'll notice that the things you want to focus on in the very beginning are school climate and culture. And some of these schools had very serious safety issues. And it's very difficult to have students engaged and learning if they're in an environment that's not safe. So I think Arlington in particular has done a very, very good job in terms of school culture and climate and safety. And I think that was the focus. And I think now it's time to, you're always going to focus on academics, but I think now it's time to really hone in on the academics and really get students engaged and kind of take it to that next level. But I do think when you're dealing with a very chaotic environment, school culture and climate is something that you really have to focus on initially.
It's the antecedent, really, to any high-quality advancement in learning.
Absolutely.
Did you have someone else that was going to present?
Yes, actually Naomi Sesqueres from Pensaris Education Solutions, she did the external evaluation. She was the consultant we brought in. So I wanted the board to have the opportunity, she came in from Washington, to be able to ask her questions about the executive summary or the evaluation process and some of the things that she saw, because she actually was able to do a deep dive in classroom observations and some things that we haven't been able to do. So I wanted her to be able to share that information with the board.
That'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
While they get that straight, can I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Yes, Tony.
From what you've seen with the schools, what's the number one thing you think the operators are going to need to do to hasten the pace of improvement?
Can I hold that for you?
Okay.
Because I'd like it to be in the context of everything else. I really would like to kind of roll through and then get to that question and we can kind of talk about it. Thank you. And thank you for your time. Good afternoon, Superintendent and board members. It's a real pleasure and honor to be here. And my name is Naomi, and I'm representing Pensaris. We did the review of the 4 turnaround academies. And I have to first say that it was not just me. We had a team of people with various expertises looking at the school. So I did get to obviously see all the information that we collected in the final report, but I personally did not visit every classroom and try to be an expert on ELA as well as parent, family, community engagement, and curriculum all at once. And I have to first apologize also for my sunglasses. I have light sensitivity issues, and so it's not super sunny outside, but I did have to keep my eyes covered today. So let's get started. Oop. How does this work? There we go. Okay, so for the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Pensaris, our approach, background on the project, how we approach this particular activity, and then some of the high-level findings of the schools. We won't go too much into detail, but I wanted to give you some background and understanding. About us, we're founded in 2008, based in Washington, D.C. Our mission is to improve organizational performance by blending business and education best. And that's really important when you're looking at turnaround schools, because even when they developed the research, they took into account management practices and case studies as well as the school-based studies. We're focused on thoughtful educational change and innovation. So it's looking at schools and not just getting excited about a fad, but really preserving what we know works in schools before we go into, what is the innovation moments. And, Pensaris comes from the word, the Latin root to think, and it's really about staying thoughtful as we're trying to undertake school reform. And our clients have been the federal level, state, local educational agencies, schools, nonprofits, mission-driven for-profits. We've worked a lot with the U.S. Department of Education, the What Works Clearinghouse, and IES in terms of translating research to practice in the Mid-Atlantic region. So we have a lot of experience actually working with the researchers in specific domain areas, and that came up in terms of our approach here today. So we did an independent audit of the turnaround academies, and the intent was to have a neutral third-party opinion of what's going on here, because you've had histories of a lot of people involved in the school system and in the turnaround academies, and there's a lot of relationship overlap, and so it was really to get that third-party neutral perspective, evaluate current operating conditions in terms of what's going on in the school. And I think, Mr. Oliver, you had highlighted that you see some of the structures in place. And it was really to understand, how close are those structures to best practices, and then also address core question 4 and also best practices as the What Works Clearinghouse would highlight those in the research. And so why we were chosen is because we have an existing approach to comprehensively looking at schools. We had tools and knowledgeable consultants to conduct the reviews, a research basis to address not only the best practices, but also the change innovation moments, experience with turnaround schools, charter schools, and urban districts, specifically at the middle and high school level. And that's something a lot of times people miss, also looking at diversity and special needs. So you know the core questions that Tamara had just outlined, and we really focused on core question 4. Is the school providing the appropriate conditions for success? And we reviewed 11 indicators under OEI's core question 4. And I want to go through and kind of point out some of where we expanded upon those. For example, curriculum was not just do they have a curriculum in place, but also the development, the implementation, and some of the culture responsive moments that we want to see in the schools. Pedagogy, looking deep at ELA and math, college and career readiness, breaking that down, also looking at how culture responsive pedagogy feeds into that system. Assessment, we also looked at data-driven instruction and data use throughout the schools, and also RTI models. HR and management, we looked at professional learning communities and some of the use of research in the schools. Mission, we looked at not only the mission, but also the leadership and core values and how that proliferated throughout the school in the change process. Climate, we looked at discipline, culture, and culture responsive pedagogy, and really looking at the cognitive science research that's out there and how that can influence the culture of school and help make the work easier. With respect to parent and community engagement, that's a really big part, not only the community engagement, but also the satisfaction elements. And then we looked at special education and also tied to the RTI process. Our process was a grounded theory approach, so we developed our questions and refined them as we went through, because there might have been certain areas we wanted to dig deeper on. We looked at first collecting documents. Then we did initiation meeting to kind of set expectations for what our process was going to be so it could be more fluent. We did site visits. We did about 2.5 days. It was staggered because we did the 4 schools at once, and we're trying to, leverage economies of scale and kind of reduce costs for the mayor's office. And in the site visits, we did leadership interviews, team interviews, class observations, general observations, also file reviews. We did a detailed review of, for example, the special education files. And we collected a number of artifacts during the interviews to tie 3 pieces of evidence together. We used focus groups and surveys as well. And the focus was really to not just hear what one person had to say about what were the conditions in the school, but also be able to validate that with a focus group statement from maybe the community or from a group of teachers. Be able to look at an artifact and see that the documentation that's being handed out throughout the school is consistent with what people are saying, it's consistent with what we see in the classroom observation. So the real focus was to pull together and aggregate information and really get that deep understanding of what's going on. Some of the limitations I wanted to definitely clarify. Timing, that we were rushing a little bit and didn't have a lot of time with the schools because they were also handling a lot else in their buildings. Access to data and documentation. Tamara spoke to before, I believe, Mr. Elsner, you had asked a question of are we getting documentation, are we getting the information we need? We did struggle as well to get some of the information from the operators. And so that was definitely a constraint in terms of working, but we still worked through that process and collected the evidence that we needed to make sure that we felt confident that the product we put out had integrity. And then definitely there was also some concerns about protecting confidentiality of the students and the data. So there were some limitations in what we saw, and we were very, very careful not to overstep our boundaries in that process. So in line with what Tamara had, and please stop me at any time if you have a question or a comment, because I'm watching your faces as I go, and definitely I can pause and answer questions at any point. Numerous positive developments in the school. Overall, I'd say that we were pleasantly surprised to walk into the schools as outsiders learning about the environment. We were definitely impressed with some of the progress that we heard, especially given the situations that were described that the operators had walked into. where we can't validate what happened 3 years ago, but we can say that given the anecdotal stories which were universally confirmed, we see a lot of progress. Legitimate curricula, there was definitely some things that we think could be better, but there were curriculum in place, and that was from the perspective of core question 4, a place where the schools were successful. Data-driven decision-making, definitely they have the mindset that they're driving student achievement using data. Addressing individual student needs, they're definitely interested in understanding what are individual student needs and how can we meet those needs. And there was definitely that general attitude and reception and beginnings of processes in place for that. Communicating with parents, families, and the community. From the baseline level, they meet the standard. Where they are growing in terms of making that more effective given the unique turnaround situation. So it doesn't mean that they are perfect in these areas, it just means that we saw these things going on. Human resource management, that they are leveraging a number of systems and processes and multi-step approaches to getting talent into their buildings. And we were impressed with a number of the people we got a chance to interact with. Professional development, that universally there's a lot of professional development going on. Definitely trying to hit those hot buttons, and the teams were very responsive to the professional development that they received. Areas for continued development, pedagogy and classroom practices. They're just not fully baked yet. You know, it's one thing to have the data, it's another thing to translate it into meaningful instruction, and that's what we'd like to see some growth in. Also, a lot of the teachers are very young, and they're novice, and they're still growing. And they're great energy and great talent, but it will take a little time for them to get the traction and show the gains with their students. And when the question was asked, I believe, Mr. Freitas, you asked the question about really whether we're going to see the gains in the data and so forth. And I think that that will come into play as the classroom practices are strengthened over time, and as we have a little bit more time to, monitor the schools and see their improvement. From the perspective of application of research-based practices, a lot of the basics were in place, but there were the really fine points that make the work more elegant and more easier to implement and accelerates it a little bit. And those things were missed. And they were really around the areas. I know a number of you are researchers in tied to universities. With respect to the cognitive science and the things we're learning about how kids break down stereotype threats and become more resilient learners and engage from that level. Those were some of the things we did not see yet implement in the schools, and that's their opportunity to make their work easier and accelerate their progress. Strategy across departments based on data. They're driving individual student plans and instruction based on data, but they haven't yet thought about it from the perspective of how do we pull back and look at our schools systematically and really put strong systems in place and think about data when we're developing our discipline plan and when we're refining it, and think about data when we're redeveloping our curriculum, and not just student performance data, but also data about your teachers and where their relative strengths or weaknesses, and how your curricular templates and your lesson plans can be better designed and structured to capture the information that's out there and drive progress. And those were some of the things that we think are the opportunities. Regular course corrections based on that. The teams haven't yet really structuredly implemented the process for meeting quarterly and looking at information that they've collected and designing out their next steps in very, very simple, concrete ways so that they can point to successes and they can keep positive momentum. That's where we see another opportunity. And I'd say a last area is leveraging extended school year and summer school. Overall, the schools are hitting the main turnaround points. The research is mainly based on case study. There isn't a lot of empirical evidence yet, but when you look at turnaround schools, you're looking for strong leadership, strong teams, and a lot of the schools really are showing that. The next point is the data driving what they're doing. They've got it on some level, still improving. The fourth really key point is a relentless focus on instruction, and they're aiming at that target. But what they also need is they're working uphill, and I'm sorry that I forget who made the comment. It may have been Mr. Oliver, about reaching down and getting the lower grade levels. And that is definitely something that they're fighting uphill against. If they're starting the middle school, high school, you don't see middle school and high school turnaround the way you see K-5. And so the way that schools usually will accelerate their progress and get this done is by leveraging extended time, leveraging the summer school program. And what we kind of gathered about the summer school program was that it wasn't rigorously organized to align with the deficits of the school year and continue fluently to prepare for the next school year. It wasn't thoroughly used as an onboarding process for transitioning students and even ninth graders or even sixth graders as they're coming in. And those are the opportunities that the schools that we see be successful with change and turnaround really, really maxing out. And we'd like to see that going forward. And so I know we're at time, so I'll just go really quickly through a couple words about the schools. Emma Donnan, vision, teamwork, structure. Very structured, great teamwork, really strong vision. They want to be the model middle school of the state. Positive developments, great leadership, team building, human resource management, assessment and data-driven decision-making. They were definitely implementing that practice. Individual student needs and student self-determination was much more developed than the other schools. Culture and climate, including college and career readiness, definitely on track for those elements. Pedagogy is the weakness, addressing procedures for special needs. There were a couple gaps in terms of their documentation, and obviously that's going to play out in their files. Mission, refinement, and community outreach, really getting out there and letting people know the great things that are going on. People, parents, students had wonderful things to say about the school. They felt like people don't know what a gem the community is developing. Application of research-based practices, the leader will admit that there are some practices that she's not gotten to implement. For example, literacy and numeracy across the curriculum. That's on the planning board. School-wide planning with data, which I mentioned, and leveraging that extended year. Manual, opportunity, talent, inspiration. There's a lot of futuristic elements in manual. Positive developments. Research-based practice and leadership. It was very prominent and really breathtaking to see and refreshing to see, rather, in the school. Assessment and data decision making, a very big part of what they're doing. A lot of career-oriented programming and innovation and new ideas coming in there, which is a great thing to have. Improving and much stronger community engagement. Climate and culture, including behavior and discipline, was a strength. Where they can continue to develop is in mission refinement and team building. Again, the pedagogy, also the diversity and culture responsive pedagogy, which is something they're working on right now, and their current reports already reflect that they've been tackling that area, which they had not been doing first semester. Culture and tightening implementation, we did see that some of the implementation was happening as per protocol and as what you'd expect, but a couple team members didn't implement it to the full extent, and it's got to be everybody marching to the same drum if this is going to work. And then again, leveraging that extended school year. How? Inclusive community ideas. Great energy, great inclusiveness within the school, great ideas. They're struggling with execution. And I'd say they're struggling with it significantly more than Emma Donnan and Manual. So they're one for us to watch. Assessment and data-driven decision-making is being implemented. It's not yet strong from the standpoint of translating the data into the instruction and the actionable planning. That's one of their next steps. Diversity and inclusion was actually a strength for them. Community engagement, very energetic, and a very positive and energetic climate. But they were a little bit less structured, and that's hurting them in terms of their progress, and that's something for us to all support going forward. Mission refinement, make sure that mission is really clear. Leadership and team building, they've had some leadership turnover, which probably impacted the school. Culture and discipline in terms of implementation, and implementation consistently. They had the most breakdowns in terms of the processes that we saw playing out in the building. Pedagogy and classroom practices, which was for all of the schools. College and career readiness program, they needed to strengthen and tighten it up. And Charter Schools USA did acknowledge that, and they did have a plan that they were kicking off this spring to tackle that particular issue with the team. Ensuring family satisfaction. We had some questions about whether the public was actually, in the community, was actually feeling satisfied with the progress. School-wide planning with data, which I mentioned before. Addressing special needs. There were some gaps in their ability to address those special needs, have the strong protocols, and have them play out throughout the building. And then lastly, leveraging their extended time. And lastly, Arlington. Their 3 words were focus, structure, and philosophy. Really strong focus and philosophy playing out the building, really strong structure. The breakdown for them is the structure that's imposed by the operator conflicting with the team on the ground trying to operate, because as you know, it's one thing to run a school, a charter school, or even just a really good school. It's a different situation when you're trying to do a turnaround school, especially at the upper grade levels. And you've got to be in tune with the realities of your environment and not just assume that theories are going to play out the way you expect them to. And that breakdown of communication was making that team struggle. And that would be the one caution about that they've got really great focus, structure, and philosophy and really great operations in place. They got to make sure they manage communication and continue to tweak and refine them to be successful. So curriculum-related practice, really strong curriculum out of the 4 schools. Assessment and data-driven decision-making. They were actually the only school to really have discussion protocols for how they approach data conversations, and that's something we want to see. Staff and faculty diversity, a really diverse staff, a lot more experienced people on their staff as well. And then a really disciplined work environment. And their discipline code, which seems excessive, we've been kind of advising the mayor's office to also track the outcomes in terms of the number of withdrawals and the number of expulsions, because a strong discipline policy is not a problem until kids start leaving, and then you're only teaching the kids who will comply or the kids who are naturally attuned to be good in your environment. It's important that they're educating everybody because it is a public school. So that's one thing to watch. However, the disciplined environment really helps those kids focus, and we're receiving the lessons, and that we thought was a real positive thing at the same time. So they need to work on mission refinement and team building because they had that breakdown. Positive culture and discipline practices to create a positive culture as well as the strictness. College and career readiness offerings to keep everything aspirational. And then ensuring family satisfaction, addressing those special populations, and then using the data school-wide and the extended time to be successful. And that kind of gives you the quick snapshot of what we found in those schools. And as general recommendations for next steps, we definitely see that the need to make sure that you're getting the information that you need to hold to really support the schools, and also hold them accountable to some of the changes that we saw also they acknowledge they need to implement. And it's really about setting a few priorities and driving to those priorities so that they're implemented with fidelity, and also so they can point back to those and be able to tout their successes. Because we did see a lot of successes in these buildings that can sometimes get lost in all the discourse and conversation and the emotions around school turnaround.
Thank you very much. I
Thanks.
have some questions,
Yes,
if you don't
please.
mind. So, does what you did play into the templates in any way?
It will. Thank you. That's a great
Because
question.
it doesn't seem to
Mhm.
yet.
It plays directly into core question 4. What we did was we aligned our tool set to core question 4. So in our final report to OEI, which will be released when they have all the data from all the core questions together, we answered core question 4 out of 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we provided additional information and recommendations for the schools to use on an ongoing basis.
So such as in the next steps, and, I mean, does your
Exactly.
information play right into this template?
It does.
But it doesn't in the one we have now.
And let me pause and see if Tamara can address that, because the template you have now, I think, addresses 1, 2, and 3, and there's a 4th question that is core question 4.
Well, core question 4 is here, so let me give an example. So you did some analysis of parent engagement, and I heard you speak about that. But as I look through the template, I see some very superficial pieces here. You know, we do a parent newsletter, there's some announcements, we had a special piece that happened, or parent engagement, like due to weather, the school closings, the parent engagement was canceled for January. And then we have another one. They don't seem to connect in any way.
Superintendent Ritz, that's a great question. What our hope is to take the feedback and the recommendations that Naomi has provided, and to use that to have the schools implement that information into the reports that you guys get on a monthly basis. So this evaluation was just completed, so we're unpacking that information, and that's what we hope will be those next steps where you're saying it's it's much more detailed than a school newsletter, or you're seeing that the next steps really align with the recommendations and the feedback provided by Pensaris. But no, you're correct in that you would not see that yet. But our hope is that they would take that feedback and utilize that information, and then that would be reflected in those reports you see monthly.
And is it possible to get a copy of what you just presented?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
To
Other questions?
Yeah, to
Dan?
follow up on that,
Mhm.
if there's another time, I read this material, and if we could have just a sharp synopsis in writing of what we just went through, and connect, I did see connections, but just for time, and then we can ask questions and get to it, but I appreciate we had review. I also, like I said, we were in a lot of these schools. It does seem we have more order, more structure, more possibilities. So it was very, it was a big move for us to intervene in these schools. And there seems to be hope, but a lot more work to do. And let's stay down the course that we're on, please. And thank you for your hard work.
And did we answer Tony's question?
Yeah, I got it off of it.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you. We are now ready for the Theodore Roosevelt College and Career Ready Academy update. And Daniel, I'll let you introduce yourself, Daniel, and you can go through the template as well.
Good afternoon, Superintendent Rentz, board members. Obviously, I'm not Teresa Brown. Yeah, I know, shocker, right? My name's Daniel Bundridge. I'm an outreach coordinator for the Department of Education up in Region 6, which we work with all the schools in Lake Porter, Jasper, and Newton counties. So I'm filling in for Teresa for the update, and we have worked really closely with Roosevelt. So I have a lot of hands-on experience with what's going on in the building. So through the PowerPoint here, again, I know we all know how to read, so I'll just touch on some of the things there. So we've been in the schools, I believe, 7 or 8 times this year, conducting walkthroughs, meeting with the leadership team. We were actually able to team with the Northwest Indiana Education Service Center with Margie DeCrane, the program director, and provide an all-day training on writing SLOs with all the staff members and administrators at Roosevelt. And then, like I said, conducting walkthroughs and sharing those walkthrough data with the administrators. Classroom observations, monthly reports, quarterly progress meetings, and ongoing communication with Title I and the outreach offices. So they communicate closely with Teresa, and then also with myself and my partner, Linda Randolph. She's the other coordinator in Northwest Indiana. We have regular communications with the administrators there and their previous superintendent, and also with the new superintendent that's on board. They just went through their SIG visit with Title a few weeks ago, and I have some information I'll be able to share on that also. Core question 1 is the educational program of success. So you can see their goals: student attendance 92%, and that has increased throughout the year. Goal 2, 90% staff attendance, consistently staying at 98%. I believe it was in 99% for January. And goal number 3, reduce office discipline referrals by 10%. And as you can see, those numbers are going down, and for January they had 21 incidences. But I will point out that they were only in school for 7 days in January. So if you do the average, that's 3 a day. And those reasonings, obviously, we had some weather conditions, which we're all aware of, but they also had some heating problems that they were forced to close the school for also. Goal number 4, reduce the out-of-school suspensions by 10%, and that number is going down. And that's something that they're consistently trying to work on, is obviously not putting students out of school, because we know, again, when they're not in the school, they're not learning. So they're really working on character education with the students, talking out the problems, and really trying to get to the root of the problem before it gets to that point. Goal number 5, reduce under-credited students by 10%. So again, you can see the percentage for those. And what they did this year is they implemented a fifth-year academy to try to get these students so they're not dropping out, and to get them up to the credits that they need by doing credit recovery. And goal 6, improve the graduation rate to 73%. And again, implementing that academy, I think, is some of the first steps to raise those graduation rates. Goal number 7, at least 65% of graduating students will enroll in vocational or 2- and 4-year college. So again, they're currently at 60%. So I think that's a very attainable goal to increase that by 5% by the end of the year. Goal number 8, increase by 5% students passing I-STEP. So you can see their results for last year, 2013 or 12-13, and they did have increases in 7th and 8th grade math and language arts from the year previous. So they are seeing some gains, obviously not where they want to be or what their goals are, but they have seen some increase in the passing percentage for I-STEP. Goal number 9, increasing percentage passing end-of-year assessments by 5%. So you can see 13.5% passing algebra and 23.8% passing English language arts for first-time test takers. So obviously this is an area that they're consistently working on. Goal 10, increase the passing percentage of advanced placement exams. Currently they had no students, and they are trying to increase the options for students. I believe they're looking at adding advanced placement literature class for next year, and again, getting more students enrolled in those types of classes. Core question 2, is your school providing appropriate conditions for success? So you can take a look at the enrollment numbers. They started out with 618, then went to 600, 582, and 591. And this is an issue for Roosevelt and a lot of our schools, that they'll have a tremendous number of students transferring to other schools within the Gary system, and vice versa, students coming in. I was there Friday doing some walkthroughs, and the principal, Miss Henry, told me that they had, I believe, 4 or 5 students enroll the previous week. So they consistently, are having students transfer out, transfer in, and again, it's hard to keep those numbers consistent. Core question number 2, is your school providing appropriate conditions for success? Student attendance, their goal is 92%, and they're at 81.9 in January. Again, going back to the suspension numbers, working on character education for the students is obviously going to help increase those student attendance numbers, keeping the students in the school. Is your school providing appropriate conditions for success? Again, touching on the suspensions, so as you can see, they've had no expulsions, and then the incidences for drugs obviously have gone down. Is the organization effective and well run? So you can see staff attendance has been at or above 90%. It was 99% for January. And they've had consistent staff in the building, which we know is very important for the teachers to develop relationships with the students. And again, when they have that tie to their teachers, there's more learning that's going to take place. They do professional development almost on a daily basis after school, so they do have a really robust professional development program that they are addressing the weaknesses that not only we see when we do the walkthroughs, but they're also seeing, and again, they're putting up programs to remediate those things. Question number 4, is the organization in sound fiscal health? So again, touching on the numbers there, their enrollment, 618 at the beginning of the year, 582 in November, and I believe they were, the last numbers that were run, they were at 591. So they're consistently staying close to 600 students. On-site monitoring observations. So like I said, we've been there, I believe, 7 or 8 times this year between myself and my coworker, Linda Randolph. And safe and orderly environment, and I think we've heard that from the previous school. Obviously, school culture and climate is number 1, and we know that in the building, in the classrooms. You can graduate from MIT, but if there's no classroom management going on, there's probably not going to be a whole lot of learning. And walking through that building, you definitely feel safe. There is a culture of order. There is security all over the place. So there's no hiding anywhere. They're consistently out in the hallways, teachers out in the hallways. Passing periods are smooth. There's no horseplay going on. So again, I know that was their goal last year, is to get on that climate and culture and create a safe and orderly environment. They've definitely done that. Routines clearly established, positive relationships being built with the students and staff, and we see that when we do the walkthroughs. Just the conversations that are going between the teachers and students, there's definitely a level of respect instilled in the school. They're getting, again, they have an academic culture established, and they're continuing to build on that. Again, I touched on the PD. The principal as an instructional leader, she's very visible out in the school. You know, she's not a bunker principal, as we call them. She's visible. She's out in the classrooms doing walkthroughs in the hallways. Staff attendance and retention, again, we touched on that. They're keeping consistent staff throughout the year, and they're having reduction in their discipline. Some of the areas needing developed from our walkthroughs and the administrators getting into the classrooms would be increasing the level of rigor of instruction and the learning activities. So having those students have real-world experiences, increasing the rigor, the challenge of those lessons that are being taught, increase opportunities for critical thinking and application, so actually applying the learning and not just listening to it, but actually doing it in the classroom. Expanded differentiated learning opportunities, so again, giving students opportunities to show that they've mastered these skills. Continue to work on active engagement. Again, just because a classroom is silent doesn't mean there's learning going on. So again, having students up out of their seats and actually applying the learning that's taking place. The students owning their own data, tracking their own data through the different online assessments that they have. Improving student achievement, obviously we've showed that's one of their areas that they're looking at, ISTEP and ECA. Reducing underaccredited students, and they're starting to do that with the 5th grade or the 5th year academy, and improving the OSS rates. And the next steps for Theodore Roosevelt is continued ongoing monitoring. And to me, this is one of the real positives of the outreach program, the outreach coordinators, is that we are actually on site. Again, we work with the 4 counties, but we are an email and phone call away. And I'm sure you can imagine the number of emails and phone calls that we get daily. So it's been a real supportive service for the schools and for Roosevelt. Again, I touched on that they had a SIG visit a few weeks ago. They providing quarterly reports that they send to Teresa Brown. And then again, continue that ongoing communication with the school and with the staff on addressing some of their weaknesses.
Questions?
Questions?
Yes, Tony?
Madam Chair, I'd just first like to state publicly that you and Linda are doing a wonderful job up in
Thank
our
you.
district.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that. I know one thing both you and I care deeply about is PBL.
Absolutely.
Is Roosevelt doing any PBL at this point?
Not true PBL. They do a blended learning model for, I believe, 7th through 9th grade, which again is online learning, and that's an area that they're looking to strengthen also to have more direct instruction. But as far as the true PBL model, no.
Have you talked with them about that?
That's a conversation, yeah, that we've started. But again, we know there's layers to all this, and PBL done right, and I used PBL in my classroom as a teacher.
Project-based
learning. Sorry, yes, project-based learning is tough to do. So again, I think we've got the safe and order environment in that school, and so just continuing on the instruction and utilizing research-based strategies.
And Tony, I picked up on the same thing, that there's an awful lot of just going through software on computers, and that tends to get better behavior, but doesn't necessarily get you maximize learning. So I too, shared that very same thing.
Yeah, I saw your suggestion for applied learning.
Brad?
What efforts are made to engage community leadership so that school leadership is supported by community leaders who may also be helping to address the whole family involvement and really trying to seek a holistic solution and not just put it on the backs of the teachers and the school leaders to what they've got.
Sure. Well, Michelle and I were actually just there Monday evening, and they had a parent meeting. And that's an area that they're really trying to increase, is get the community and parents involved. They are partnering with the Indiana Parenting Institute, so they are having some help organizing those type of events. And you know, all I can say really is that it's an ongoing process, and they're working towards improving that.
Dan?
You've been in the school. We're making progress compared to where we started 3 years ago?
Yeah.
So it's a little safer, more, the reports we got
I mean,
originally were
you
just
can
very
look at
discouraging.
you can look at the testing data, which I'm really not that focused on. What my assessment is more based on is the culture of the school, what I hear from parents and from students. There seems to be a general
More order, safety.
satisfaction. But there's a lot of room for improvement, because
Oh, yeah.
ultimately we're going to want to see test scores.
But look where we started. It wasn't
It's-
orderly, it wasn't
Yeah,
safe.
the things that should have come first, I believe, came first,
Okay.
and now we're waiting on performance to catch up.
So it looks like it was a good move, we're making progress. A lot of hard work.
You want me to answer that?
Yeah.
Because you know, you all voted to take over that school right a couple weeks before I got on the board. Had I actually been here for that vote, I would have voted not to take over the school. I would have voted to close it.
Well,
If
Okay,
you're
but-
measuring it against, you know,
if it was
letting
closed, it wouldn't be
remain-
better or worse, it wouldn't be. So, I mean, it seems that there's more order and some safety from where we started.
If you're gonna have a school there, you know, it's doing better than that.
If you close it, you can't prove it.
Well, I guess, well, while I'm talking, I'm gonna just throw this out here. We all need to be considering at this point what the end game is.
Yes.
I mean, you figure in about 2 years, what's gonna happen? When this contract ends, what's gonna happen? I don't think anyone knows. I mean, I started asking some of the TSOs about it. Well, what happens in 2 years? They don't know. The school corporation doesn't know. I don't know. But for planning purposes, they probably need to know this summer what happens at the end of that contract.
And if I could add on that, that was one of the main concerns at the parent meeting. So what happens after this contract is over? So that question is out there from the parents. What's the next step? What's the plan after that contract's over?
Probably we
And-
could put these reports earlier in the meeting, start talking about this kind of thing. We may have more options in the future.
The future is now.
And I'll just kind of add a caveat to that, because in my visit to that they may see some improvement in their scores perhaps on ISTEP or their ECAs, but ultimately we're looking at literacy deficits that are going to prevent them having major improvements in that realm, I feel. So it's about many years below in literacy scores. That's not going to allow them to really increase the end game like you're going to see, and that may be true for some of the other turnarounds that we're talking about as well. So when we get to the place in Indiana where we have uniform literacy measures, we really can see apples to apples what's going on and what needs to happen with all of that, not just at a particular grade level, but systematically and systemically. Then we'll be able to really look at our information. When you go to any of these schools, one of the first things they point out, here's our SRI, here's our information on our reading, here's what we're doing, see the improvement, because it is about that. It's about seeing, here's some gains we made, but the passing on that grade level assessment piece may not be there still. So it'll, the conversation is going to be for every school really that is low performing. That's what it is that we're really talking about.
Yeah, and I would also point the whole conversation about the process, not just treating the end node system. We became very aware of that, and the folks that discussed these takeover situations, that we were dealing almost exclusively with high schools, except for one middle school. And we were looking at years of a management, leadership, ability to deliver quality education, and then it becomes so clear by high school that the system needs to be looked at. So it was a good first step. By good, it had to happen. there's probably a lot more work to do, and 2 years is a very short time frame for people to plan and think. I've heard, I haven't read it, but the legislature's looking at some options too. I think we'll have more, but you gotta look at it systemically. You can't just look at the high schools or a middle school. It's a whole years of work that need to be done.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the next item, you received some information regarding the Roosevelt High School update in terms of its facilities and the review and report. It's my understanding, schools in session at Roosevelt, they are operating classes in safe areas, and while we know there's still structural pieces that are being addressed by the Gary School Corporation, school is operating and things are as they should be. We've
Madam
not heard any
Superintendent?
reports to the contrary.
Sorry to interrupt.
No problem.
But just hearing the comments about community involvement, I just saw a little news blurb about the mayor of Gary is partnering with the National League of Cities and the U.S. Department of Education to hold a community conversation to discuss strategies to advance learning, enhance student engagement, and improve schools through K through 12. I think that was announced yesterday or the
Yeah,
day before.
thanks.
So
In fact, I
think
should have put
that's
it on my
positive
announcement.
news for the city of Gary, the leadership of the city, and
So let me
and
expand
K
on
through
that a little
12.
bit if you don't mind.
Sure.
We're having a very large summit, not just of, and it includes all charter schools. It includes the Gary School Corporation. It includes all key stakeholders, community people. We're really going to talk about the systemic issue of what we need to be addressing and how we're going to address it as a Gary community. So our Department of Outreach really is responsible for coming up with the idea. And we had a conversation with the mayor, and it was a great conversation. And so, yeah, we have great opportunities to leverage some possible grant monies at the federal level to move things through, as well as address some very systemic issues. As you know, whether they're charter or whether it's Gary Public Schools, we have many schools. In fact, almost all of them are in the focus and priority area. So it's not really who's working with the school so much as what is it we're going to do as a community and as school entities to bring all of our resources together to make some good changes.
Well, I just wanted to point that out, that
Thank you.
Gary, Indiana is one of, I believe, 14 cities that is part of this initiative nationally, and the only one in the state of Indiana. So I think the leadership of the mayor up there, it should be pointed out, and congratulate her and the Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Education and the National League of Cities for partnering on this initiative.
We're excited about it. Thank you.
Madam Chair, before we
Yes,
leave
Tony?
Roosevelt, it's my understanding there's been some progress on the mold issue, but can we just get an update from Michelle on that real quick?
Michelle, do you have an update? I wasn't where she had an update.
I don't think that I have anything that I haven't sent in the weekly updates,
Okay.
but we did provide everyone the mold inspection that the Indiana State Department of Health had conducted. Teresa Brown, the Assistant Superintendent for Outreach, and I drove up, and we were present for that, and we were able to walk through some classrooms as well. In addition to that, and I think that you all know, there was a determination that there was some problematic mold in some areas of the building, but where the students are, they are not at risk. I will say that at the parent meeting, I don't know where Daniel went, but at the parent board meeting that we went to on Monday night, the issue with the mold being in the band room and the affected musical instruments was raised. So it is a continuing concern, and it is affecting the students' experience in that they can't continue to practice band in the usual place, and there's less access to the instruments, which is an integral part. We have talked with the Department of Administration to identify 3 state-approved entities that could give estimates for mold remediation, and we'll continue to work with them to get those estimates.
Do we have estimates yet? The estimates are here.
No, we don't have
We
the
don't have
estimates
them.
yet. No, we just got approval to be able to send these folks in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, we're going to have discussion on REPA 3, and it's my understanding Risa and Michelle, you're going to do that presentation. And following that discussion, then there is an action item on REPA 3.
We anticipate that this is going to be a lengthy.
Prior to that, Jill, I think you wanted to give some comment. Jill Shedd. Pardon me. And thanks for waiting around.
Sure, this is important enough, so I appreciate it. Thank you all for hanging in there. This is a long day. I wrote good morning, so I have to switch that to good afternoon.
Well, good evening.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
No.
As a reminder, I am Jill Shedd. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Indiana Association of Colleges for Teacher Education, IACTE. And all I really wanted to share with you is that I do appreciate the opportunity that you have on your agenda and for this meeting to have a conversation about REPA 3. It was very helpful for us to see the comparative matrix that were in the board materials as to differences between REPA 2 and 3. And we found it very beneficial that in the early part of that document, you were able to see and share with all of us the public comments that you received relative to the individual elements. And that was very nice to see at the very beginning of the document. We did not see that consistently through the document, so I'm hoping that there will be further discussion about some of those issues. And really just to share with you that IACTE continues to have important concerns about the proposals in REPA 3, and there are 3 major ones in our opinion. Still concerned that the creation of yet another teacher permit is in REPA 3. The creation of a new adjunct teacher permit remains a concern for us. Significant changes that are being proposed for the criteria for building and district level administrators and leaders is a concern. And lastly, the identification of the specific content areas that could be added to a license by taking a test only. It's unclear to me from the matrix what still lasts from REPA and what are proposed changes. We're supportive of the initial list. They're all important. And these 3 concerns really just, in our opinion, reflect a lowering of standards at a time when we're all working so very hard to raise standards, to improve the quality of our teachers and our building leaders, their role in the curricula and the evaluation of teaching and learning in schools. So this seems so very counterintuitive to all of us. And I hope for a very rich discussion about these issues and the opportunities for more public comment, that we can persist in our effort to raise the quality of standards and the education for our students in our classrooms. So thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Yes, did somebody have a question? Oh, okay. All right, so now the purpose of the discussion that we're going to have has bearing on the action item. So if we proceed with the rulemaking for REPA 3, the discussion is to give guidance for that rulemaking, but we are going to have an action item that will deal with REPA 3 as whether we move forward or not. I know that's going to be the action item. So with that in mind, we're going to go through a PowerPoint kind of slide, and as we have conversation, we are really giving possible direction to Risa Renee and Michelle McGowan, who will be working jointly on the wording and the working of the rule language, and if we go forward with rulemaking. So we'll let this conversation guide that. So speak up. Thank you.
Since we anticipate that this will be a lengthy discussion, if it's okay, Risa and I would like to sit. We've had a table placed up here, and we're going to move the mic down.
Do we need to have a quick break or no? You're okay? All right. if you want to follow along somewhat, I believe their PowerPoint's going to follow this guideline that they gave you of comments. So you might want to have that handy.
As the superintendent mentioned, during the lunch break, we placed hard copy materials on all of your seats or on the table in front of you. That includes the almost 1,000 public comments that we received regarding the document. You also have those electronically, but I know that as we talk about it, you might want to flip through and identify them. On the top of that packet, you will see there is a table of contents. I created the table of contents. I read all of the comments, I numbered them, and I categorized them based on my best attempt of qualitative categories, as you will see. So if you want to read the comments that address the adjunct permit, then you can look at the numbering. I listed every single public comment that talks about the adjunct, or every public comment that talks about the removal of the 10-year license. So hopefully that will be a useful guide. Directly behind the table of contents is a document that RISA prepared. This gives some very useful background about where the responsibilities related to licensure have lived at different times. Behind that, we recently received an email from Dr. Gieslin at the Indiana School for the Deaf, and he had some comments that came after we had closed public comment, but I wanted to make sure that they were given to you. But I received them after I had already distributed the table of comments and the other comments, so I didn't want to suddenly throw something into the table of contents and look like I'm switching things around. So I just thought I would put that on top, and we can talk about it when we get to the relevant category. That said, we'll begin.
I might start by saying that because we have documents that we've referred to as REPA 1, REPA 2, and REPA 3, that is pretty confusing. And it's confusing for us, it's confusing for everybody. But I just want to focus your attention a little bit. The document that we refer to as REPA 2 is the rule document that was never finalized. So what you're really considering is proposed rules that we've been calling REPA 3 that are going to change our existing licensing rules that are called REPA, and they have been in place since May of 2010. So I'm not really going to be talking about REPA 2 or REPA 1. For me, it's REPA, which is in effect right now, and then the REPA 3 proposed changes that you have. Okay? Yeah, 2 documents is enough for me to worry about. There's a general background that we've put up on this first slide for you that just kind of gives you a little bit of overview about what is in the licensing rules right now. And this is very high level. Certainly they contain lots more details than this, but you'll see some references in the public comments that you got about some of these areas. Our teaching license, our regular teaching licenses are really divided up into 3 categories, which is an initial practitioner license. That's a 2-year license that corresponds to completing a 2-year Indiana mentoring and assessment program, which is kind of a new teacher support program. Then once the IMAP program has been completed, an individual can convert that license to a 5-year practitioner program, or license, sorry. And then upon completion of a graduate degree, there is an additional 10-year license. It's called an accomplished practitioner license that individuals can obtain if they want to go forward and obtain a graduate degree and they have at least 2 years of classroom experience. I'm going to go back quickly to the paragraph right above that. One of the things that we hope to accomplish with the rulemaking process is to move the licensing rules that we're operating under to the title in the administrative code under the State Board of Education. Because the rules that we are operating under now, the REPA rules, were promulgated by the Professional Standards Board, which of course no longer exists. Although the legislature moved the jurisdiction and authority of the Professional Standards Board over to you, what they didn't do is they failed to move the rules with that. So we have a rule out there that's under a defunct title of the administrative code. And it means that we can't amend it, we can't tweak it, we can't adjudicate under it. So, you know, one of the things we will accomplish in the rulemaking process is to put these rules, this living document, under the State Board of Education so that you can, you know, deal with it in the future. Okay, now go back. We have district level administrator licenses. We have 4 types. We have superintendent, director of special education, director of career and technical education, and director of curriculum and instruction. And we have a building level administrator license, and there also is a temporary district level administrator license that is in the current rules. It's a temporary superintendent license that is not portable, and it was one of those flexibility items that was included in the original REPA rules. We have some alternative pathways in the current rules. We have emergency permits. We have transition to teaching programs and permits. We have an alternative called advanced degree that was created to help primarily higher education faculty who, you know, teach at the higher education level but had never been through a traditional teacher prep program, and so they couldn't qualify for a K-12 teaching license if they wanted one. So legislatively, this advanced degree alternative was created for them where they can, they have a path to licensure. And then we have workplace specialist licenses, which are in the career and technical area, and many of those are based on actual skilled trade and work experience. And you know, we do have some workplace specialists that have bachelor's degrees, but many of them do not. They are electricians and plumbers and technology folks, and so they qualify for their licensure through a different path also. So that's kind of a very high level summary of many of the things that we have in our current licensing rules. Yeah,
With the
Andrea?
workplace specialist, does that apply to, say, a chemist at Eli Lilly who might teach chemistry?
Well, not currently. Currently, workplace specialists are licenses that are in career and technical education and for those classes that generate additional vocational dollars in the funding formula. So currently, no.
But Andrea, I think they do that through transition to teaching.
Well,
I mean,
they
those
can.
who have that kind of can go through
Sure.
that pathway.
I mean, they could always use one of the other alternative paths that we have currently. Again, a little more background. There were some legislative changes made last year that impact licensure. One was the creation of a charter school license. Previously, under legislation, we were to identify a path to licensure for individuals who were teaching in charter schools who wanted a license. And the path that we had identified was transition to teaching programs. And it also allowed those individuals to teach under a transition to teaching permit while they completed that program for full licensure. Apparently that didn't meet some of the needs that were brought to the attention of legislators because the General Assembly in 2013 created a charter school license that has it's much more flexible. It has a lot less controls on it. for lack of, that might not be a term you would use, but it's a term I use. And also there was an amendment to the School Powers Act that allows local flexibility for hiring of an individual to serve as a superintendent, and they do not need to be holders of a superintendent's license. So that was just a hiring flexibility. It doesn't direct us to issue a license, but it does allow hiring flexibility to hire someone to serve in a superintendent's role in a local school.
And so are you saying, are those represented in REPA 3, or those are things that are already in?
They're not. We're
current?
just saying they are in effect right now,
But
but
they
they
don't
were
need to be in
legislated.
rulemaking.
They aren't
Okay.
a part of the rulemaking, but
Okay.
they do come up in some
Yeah, I just
of
wanted
the
everybody to be
big
clear, they
public
weren't in the
comments
REPA
that
3.
we got.
So, both of these items, as well as the advanced degree license, are all creatures of statute, and they are not in the REPA 3 document in any way. They're not in, even the advanced degree license is not in REPA, but they are pathways that exist. So now we're going, and what I would recommend is using the table of contents as a guide. We're hoping to, this PowerPoint was developed to hit all of the colors of comment, because I tried to color code. And in some way, they may not get an entire slide, but they are touched by one of the slides. So we're just going to start to walk through those, and we hope that this can be a discussion. So if you want more detail, please interrupt us or flag us and we'll go.
Brad?
I am more than happy to email it to everyone.
Brad?
So as we go along, I want to make the best use of our time because we're running out of it. So we've got an action item kind of hanging out here. If we want to recommend things for you to look at, and with the belief that it's coming back to us again, because I don't know what's going to happen to the action item, is now the time?
Yes.
As we come through? Okay.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
As we go through each one of these, it's your time to speak, because it's going to guide how they proceed. So, for an example, adjunct permit, this section of the rulemaking, is it something that we want to keep? Is it something we don't want them to keep in there? We're going to give them some guidance now as to the rewriting of the rule. And to guide us also, you have documentation to show what other people thought. So yes, we do.
And
Tony?
just for clarification, this is on the last slide, but maybe we should have, maybe I put it earlier. Based on, assuming that we don't terminate the rule, if it moves forward, we will listen to what the guidance that you give us and redraft.
Right.
Because in order for this document to move to the next step, which is the consideration by the Attorney General's office, to make sure it complies with the law, we have to give you the actual text that you would then vote on. So we are here to listen and hear what changes you would like for us to make to the document itself.
And we're not necessarily bound, if we continue to proceed, like it happens like the next meeting.
No.
So plenty of time to review things and work through things. Tony, question?
In the event my effort to terminate the REPA 3 rulemaking doesn't pass, I would offer to totally eliminate the adjunct permit.
All right, so Tony's given some comment regarding the adjunct permit. Other comments regarding it, Brad?
I was leaning that way as well. I have a problem with it, especially at the elementary level. I think it's a bad idea. But in recent conversations around some of the STEM shortages in the state and the need to get people from industry there's been some conversation about, here's what I'm asking and wondering about. Is there a way to modify or reduce the requirements to get them in specific STEM areas? Is there a way to look at it that way or to rethink about it that way? And maybe that's kind of where you're going with your question if you got at the bottom of it.
Brad, would you include shortage areas also? If there are shortage areas outside of STEM, would you?
My concern has always been, and it has been, is the lack of them ever coming back to teacher prep program, because under the emergency permit rule right now, it still requires them to enroll into a transition to teaching program. So they're getting pedagogy at some point. And I know when this was before the board the previous time, and I was on that side of it, there was some discussion about throwing in a pedagogy class. So I I'm not saying like they just get to come in and they get a permit and they go, but I'm wondering if there could be a pathway similar to TTT, but focuses specifically on rethinking how we get more industry people to the classroom at the secondary level, but I don't like the adjunct permit.
Yeah, you could certainly redraft the language in a way that designated particular areas for which this permit would be eligible. So if you were thinking STEM, so if it's about pathways, similar to like what we do with workplace specialist licenses, as Risa described, those are limited to particular fields.
And I want to be careful because I think what I'm saying is I want to get rid of the adjunct faculty permit, but I also see a need, and I think that's probably what happened. There probably was a need, and then it kind of exploded into this. I'm not comfortable with this, but I'm also very aware that one of the things that the high schools are wrestling with in the universities is that there's not enough qualified high school folks that can serve for dual credit opportunities. So if we can grow and develop teachers in the STEM areas or in shortage areas, particularly those that can be earning enough credits to qualify that the university could use them in a dual credit type situation, I see that as a valuable thing, but that is not what this is. So I'm asking, is there a way to get rid of this or bring us something back that addresses a need that I think that was maybe intended for and then it exploded?
And I would add a little bit to that. I think the conversation, perhaps at the higher education levels, is how can we make sure that we're training people to be in STEM, even in the elementary level, that STEM kind of certification kind of component. So I know there's ongoing conversation making sure that we've got it embedded within what it is that we're teaching. Yeah.
Do you want to go through all at once, or do you want one at a time?
No, we're doing one at a time. We're doing adjunct right now.
I have more than one up here. I do favor limiting it.
Oh, I think all these things are
these
all
are
under
one-
adjunct
all
permit.
those are under.
All of
you know,
those
do
pieces.
all of adjunct at one time?
Yes.
Okay.
Just to try to get conversation going.
I don't see I don't see a need for 5,000 of these. That's why I would hate to limit it to stem cells. I think this is a unique, once in a lifetime situation for a school that has someone that fits perfectly that can do it. Do I see 500 people get hired? Should they be? No. But if there's 5 schools across the state that could use this to increase the talent of their staff, I think they should have that right. That's why I would hate to limit it to STEM, just to STEM areas, because if I'm in city A and my shortage is a language arts teacher, then that's the only shortage that I care about. I do like shortening it from 5 years to 2 years, and I think Brad alluded to earlier, that ensures that you have that pedagogy in those first 2 years. And I would also like this board to have some input on where they get that. I don't know how we set that up, as where it's not just some random.
So under the adjunct, and I'll just put my 2 cents in, I'm not for the adjunct permit here. I don't mind exploring some other pieces that might attract, teachers with specialties, but I'm not for the adjunct method of making that happen.
And I look at things like our elementary and our reading teachers and stuff, and there's so much pedagogy involved and there's so much teaching. If you're talking about a STEM type class and you're a specialist in science and you've been an engineer and you're teaching a high school level class, it's very different than teaching first graders how to read. Number one, I don't know that there's a need out there for. There's not a shortage. There's a need for great kindergarten and first grade teachers, but there's not a shortage in the same way, and I can justify it as shortage in the same way.
So am I hearing an interest in limiting it to secondary? If you were to continue it, I'm just taking notes.
That would be, I would like to know.
I would include areas of shortage.
So you're talking about keeping the adjunct piece?
I guess I can't say whether I want to keep it or not till I see language. So conceptually, maybe, maybe not, probably no. But if we're talking about STEM, and then because someone has a license doesn't mean they're entitled to a job, right? So there is still a process where these people have to apply for a job. And the local school district, if we believe in local control, may say, we're not going to hire anyone with an adjunct permit. Is that correct? So this isn't the entitlement to a job certificate. This is a certificate that says, yes, they meet minimal state requirements. Then they have to go out and apply for a position. And I think in some districts that these people won't get hired. In other districts, they will be craving for some of these people. I have a couple of other issues. Since I've got the floor now, I'll take advantage of it. One is the list of providers, pedagogy provided by a list of providers. I would like to see some criteria listed that determines what the criteria are. And my colleague just made a good point that based on those criteria, we should have the ability to approve them, or the department approves them, but some kind of an approval process, what I would like to see. So that's another point. Next point is on the pedagogical aspect. It implies that pedagogy occurs simultaneously while they're teaching. And I would like to see some requirement prior to them actually beginning teaching that they have, I'll call it a module, a course, some kind of pedagogical training, maybe over a summer period, where they're getting some basic kind of understanding of what teaching is all about before they go in. And a third component I'd like to see is constant evaluation of these people. If they jump in there and they are sinking quickly, then there should be a mechanism within our rules that enables a principal to move that person on to something else, a different profession. Am I clear enough on those? So I hear us saying we're doing a list, right? You're looking at me and sort of in a wonderment. Are you keeping a list of things that we like to say? I thought that was the activity.
Yeah, that's what
Yes,
we're doing.
I think the wonderment was thinking about an administrative rule trying to interrupt the F corporation level contract, but that's my legal mind working.
Well, it
Just
could
the
be
last
at the end of the year.
suggestion.
But I would hate to see us grant a permit for multiple years and then the school corporation stuck with an individual who they don't really want. So that's
And
how you do it.
I also hear that, you know, the conceptual piece of making sure that our secondary schools have people of the caliber that they want wouldn't necessarily have to happen through an adjunct kind of thing. So
Right.
we're giving you some freedom to explore and come up with ways in which that might happen.
You know, I see a lot of, you know, the transition to work and the emergency permit plans are already in place. And so I don't believe the adjunct is adding any more value to what we already have in place that we can continue to do. So it's just one more piece to that puzzle that we didn't need.
Then what's the difference between the adjunct permit and some of the other pathways? Just to clarify. Or is it the same? And if it's the same,
It's lessened.
It's less.
They don't have to go through really anything.
Well, for instance, emergency permits are issued at the request of the school district in an area where they
Yes.
are having difficulty staffing.
Mhm.
So it's tied to employment. So, you know, you can't take your emergency permit and go shop yourself around. It's tied to your employment. And in order to renew it annually, you need to get into a teacher ed program and be taking coursework that will eventually lead towards full licensure. A transition to teaching permit is issued to an individual who already has met the requirements to be admitted into a transition to teaching program, and they can teach on that permit for 3 years. They're non-renewable, but during that 3 years, that's generally enough time for them to complete a transition to teaching program, even if they're only doing it part-time. And the transition to teaching program provides them pedagogy, and they have to pass the licensure tests before they can get their regular license. So we do have those other paths for individuals coming in at the bachelor degree, with a bachelor degree, that require them to be doing something that's, you know, taking a program that will lead to licensure.
And I might add, that TTT track includes an essential pedagogy so that we feel fairly comfortable they've had certain things they need to be successful.
Yeah,
in
that's
college.
what
So
transition to
that's-
teaching programs do. They take individuals who already have a major in the content area that they're gonna teach, and it gives them the pedagogy component in it's abbreviated, but it is the essential pedagogy component that they get in the transition to teaching program.
while they're employed.
Can be, don't have to be, don't
Or
have to
could be.
be. I mean, you can complete a transition to teaching program and still be employed as a chemist somewhere or as a, doing something else. But if you find a district that wants to hire you, you can also get a permit, a transition to teaching permit, and teach while you're completing the program.
So we hear typically that the chemist from Lilly who wants to teach, and so you're saying we have pathways already that would allow that individual to go immediately into a school corporation while simultaneously taking the pedagogical courses.
Right, and if that chemist from Lilly has a master's degree in chemistry, and maybe they've done some adjunct teaching, they can use the advanced degree pathway, pass their chemistry test, and be licensed that way too, because we use their, by statute, we can use their adjunct teaching experience as demonstration of pedagogy.
From the field's point of view, and Troy, I guess, said it most eloquently, there's not been an outcry for this. There has not been an outcry from the field for an adjunct permit, because we feel we already have all of these different ways to get the quality person that we need to in our classrooms. So I couldn't have said it any better, Troy. There you go.
Superintendent, I still would like to.
Oh,
comment
sorry,
on the
Andrea.
adjunct.
Didn't see your
Well,
hand.
I'm going to speak in support of the adjunct, certainly with a high school limitation as an option, because I think the studies show that subject area mastery is especially important in the high school grades when the teachers are subject area specialists. I don't see what the harm is in giving a principal flexibility to go out and find that dynamite teacher. I'm thinking not just of the Lilly chemist. What if their drama program is suffering and they can get a retired actress from with an equity license from the IRT and hire that person? And most principals would have the good sense, I think, to make sure that person has the personality to be a teacher. I feel like that giving the principal flexibility to use that adjunct would be extremely helpful, especially in special areas like music and theater, possibly chemistry, possibly history, art. And so I want to talk about the pedagogical requirement, because just speaking for myself, when I started teaching with no experience, I was matched up with a 50-year educator, and she mentored me. And I would think that as we look at pedagogy requirements, if schools have in place exemplary mentorship programs, that could also suffice for the pedagogical requirement. And I think we should do something to encourage those kind of mentor programs, because studies also shows those are extremely effective at helping teachers become highly effective.
May I comment?
Dan?
I would agree that we should. You see, if you have high standards and you test and people are accountable and their schools are accountable and they get a grade, superintendents and principals and assistant principals are wise people, and they want to serve their children well, and they want to achieve. And if they find a teacher with a unique set of skills and with their resources or others, if adjunct gives another flexibility, I just want to be assured it isn't just another unique opportunity to bring talent to our profession. And I wouldn't get too, I wouldn't want to be too quick to throw it out the window, because I've not unpacked this onion totally just recently, but when we originally worked on this, it seemed like it gave a unique opportunity for professional people to make some discernments of who would be good for the children they serve. And if they find that unique person, and this gives us a unique avenue to get them in there and keep them in there, I think we ought to keep it. I'm willing to look at the information.
Let me just quickly add my comments too, and I'm conceptually supportive as well. You know, I think I would probably be on the side today of modifying with some of the limitations relating to high school and STEM and so on. But you know, conceptually, I think we shouldn't. We should provide our school, you know, principals and so on with additional opportunities to bring on talent to teach our school children. So I'm supportive of that, and as the point has been made, this does not guarantee anybody will be working in a position, but it just frees up a little bit the opportunity for talented professionals to be connected with schools that may need their services.
Did we totally confuse you?
I have taken close notes, and I think Risa and I will get together and we'll bring language back, as the last slide said, either in April or May, depending on what you guys throw us. And you will choose to either modify again or vote it down, or and again, assuming that this moves forward past the action item.
Okay, we're on to emergency permit. Is that your next one?
Oh,
Are you going in the order of our paper, or do you have different breakdowns?
so I felt as though while I said that not everything on the table of contents gets a slide.
Okay.
Given the last two slides, I considered emergency permit to have been covered.
Okay.
But you can see the tenor of the character of the comments on your table of contents, and if we want to talk about it while we're here, we certainly can. Is there interest in modifying the emergency permit as it is written now?
I don't think there was any big language changes on emergency permit. It remained the same, so it's fine with me. License format?
This covers a few types of comments that we had, covering both the elimination of the initial the elimination of the current 2-year initial practitioner license, because what the proposed language in REPA 3 would do is expand that to a 5-year license. And again, as Risa mentioned, that is accompanied by the removal of the IMAP requirement. There have been recommendations to restore that, and there were a few comments about that. And then additionally, under current rules, and previously we have had a 10-year license option available. Again, Risa mentioned this. And the proposed language for REPA 3 would eliminate the 10-year license, and licenses would only be available on 5-year spans. As you can see by your comment summary, there were a lot of comments to restore the 10-year license format, and there were also comments that recommended that in addition to restoring the 10-year license format, to make eligible those individuals who have national board certification.
So I'll be glad to talk to that last one, because that's why I pursued national board certification, like pure and simple. As it stood, if I did national board certification, and I had also gotten a master's degree, which didn't do anything more for my licensing, I might add, but I said, that's going to give me a 10-year license as opposed to a 5-year license. So when I did national board certification, my master's degree at the same time was going to give me a 5-year license, but if I was national board certified, I was going to be having a 10-year license. That was an incentive to me to actually pursue national board certification in the area of library science. So I did, and I was issued a 10-year license, and that was an incentive for me to go forward, to actually do that. If that hadn't been there, it wouldn't have been any different. It's just doing your 5-year license, that you have to do your renewal process. So I want to encourage professionals to actually go for national board certification. I feel that we should have thousands of national board certified teachers in Indiana, and having that incentive in there still would be good. And I really think that professionals, educators, should have some accomplished, they should be recognized for their accomplishments, and having that 10-year license piece in there is valuable.
May I ask about a 10-year license, just to be sure I'm clear? What does it mean to have a 10-year license? What are the privileges, or what does it result in children learning and serving our children better? Does it mean they learn more, or do we have any data? Or?
No, we don't have any data that ties 10-year licenses to student achievement.
So what are the requirements like a CPA has to get some hours, or a lawyer
Well,
has to have continuing ed?
all
So do you get a
educators have
10-year
to do
license, and
that.
then you don't have to go to school anymore, or what's the
Well,
deal?
No.
No, all educators have to do professional growth plans with professional development to renew their licenses now. The 10-year license simply is that you hold the license for 10 years, so,
Irregardless of what you're doing in between?
yes.
So
know,
if the
it
students
took
under your
place-
care aren't learning, and they're not doing well, you have a 10-year license, it doesn't matter?
It took the place of the life license. Under several of the earlier sets of licensing rules, it was possible to obtain a life teaching license. Under a set of rules in the 90s called Rules 46, 47, we eliminated the life license and put into place the requirement for ongoing professional development for renewal. But there was still a sense that educators who wanted to go forward and earn graduate degrees and had teaching experience in the classroom should be able to obtain a license that had some longer period of time. And so that's what the 10-year license was developed for. And I'm not defending it or not. I
No, I
wasn't
was just
working
asking
in
of the
the area when they
benefits,
did that.
privileges,
But
especially the
it's
students.
a privilege to hold the license for 10 years so that
What is it that you have to have in order to get a 10-year license?
you have to have a master's degree and at least 2 years of teaching experience. You have to hold a proficient practitioner license first, which means you've been in the classroom 2 years and completed IMAP, and then obtain a graduate degree.
It's currently really our only incentive to get a master's degree.
Yeah.
Since compensation is not based upon having master's degrees anymore, it's really our only incentive to proceeding and actually making a commitment to get a master's degree in your educational field. And then, of course, and then it used to be not only a master's degree, but you also could get it with national board certification. Yes, go ahead, Carrie.
So also, you know, you're saying that it helps kids. A 5-year license doesn't either. If I'm a
Right,
terrible
that's what
teacher
I
with a
said.
5-year license and I get fired, they don't take my license away, they just fire me. What it does do is mean that I don't have to go through the paperwork of, I still have to get my professional development in. I still have to, even now, 17 years of experience, I've got my master's, I still have to get professional development, but I don't have to do all the paperwork. Literally, my principal has to sign off every time I do even a half-hour of professional development. It saves me all that paperwork over a longer period of time, which actually then frees me up from the paperwork side of things.
So it brings the teacher paperwork, but it's not a big achievement in terms of student achievement, so it saves you.
Licensing is not tied to teacher performance. Let's just put it that way.
That's a good summary.
Would it be possible to go 10 years with no PD if you had a 10-year license?
No, and that's where I was gonna go with my
Uh,
comment, because we're in a different environment now. and,
Absolutely.
I mean, the reality of it
And
is,
that's
there's
my-
so much professional development has to happen now because of all the accountability that, that's why I have no problem with 10-year license.
I don't care if you put in a
Just
50-year
let's have a
license
life-
as
let's have
long
a
as
lifetime
there's,
deal, not waste
I
money.
honestly wouldn't care.
Again,
As
the
long as
president.
there's a PD stipulation to it, I don't care if it's a life license. I care less.
That's what I was.
As long as.
You still have,
Exactly
you
what
still
you're
have to
saying.
do that in order to get your next license.
I missed the lifetime license by 1 year. I got my master's.
You know, the best way to get a lifetime license is do an excellent job. You'll have a license. You'll be employed forever. Do well by children, teach well, you'll have
I
a
missed it by
job.
1 year.
He's roll 46, I'm roll 47, so.
Well, I'm bullet 400, I'm over 400, so.
David?
I would like to see 2 issues on the list for our consideration. I think you said currently we don't have a 5-year license, or
Oh, no.
it's not being recommended, or,
What do we currently have,
wait, what do we
Risa?
currently have?
Okay, the first license that a teacher gets is a 2-year
2-year.
initial practitioner license.
Right, so that previous slide, 2, 5, and
Yes,
10?
yes.
Is that current?
5 and
Correct.
10 is current.
Correct.
And so what we're considering is keeping that?
No. What the changes in the new Repro 3, correct me if I'm wrong, are going to 5-year licenses, period.
Yes.
There would be no 2, 5, and 10.
I-
They would be just totally 5-year renewals. And-
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's what is being suggested.
Yeah, I would suggest we need to, in a broader context, at least have a vote or a discussion on retaining 2, 5, and 10. I don't know if there's support for that or not, but at least as one member, I'd like to see that. The other notion, and I agree with State Superintendent, someone that gets board certified, I think there needs to be a mechanism to grant additional time. And I really like the concept that a teacher who achieves gets something from us. So there's an incentive built in. So using that same incentive, why don't we link it to highly effective teachers? For example, if, and I'm just spouting an idea, a concept since we're brainstorming, if a teacher is rated highly effective for 3 consecutive years, they get a 5-year, 10-year license. But link it to performance, and it answers Dan's question about are kids achieving?
Well, respectfully, not really. It doesn't answer my question because.
Okay,
an
then it doesn't, but
educator-
I'd
an
still like to see it
educator,
on the list.
Frankly, the good educators I know, they're so intrinsically motivated that their children do well. If you want to give them external, put some money in their wallet or do something like that. But I was just asking a simple question. and
I
was really
would not
pleased
be
to
in
get the
favor of
answer.
linking it to licensing.
Then why do we link it to board certification? Because that's an incentive.
If you
It-
can
it's-
prove that children to do better because of that, that'd be interesting.
Oh,
Do you
there,
think they
there
do
is
better
research to
because
show
of board
that.
certification? I do. I think teachers who are board certified are more effective teachers in general.
It'd be great to see the research.
There is research on that.
Yeah. So so I like the concept. I'm just trying to expand it
So let's,
to provide encouragement to those teachers who are highly effective.
so let's try and give some direction as to what they might want to do in bringing some language back to us. The proposal is to have 5 years, period. Our current mechanism is 2, 5, and 10, with masters and national board certification being, linked to that 10-year kind of piece. So just kind of a sense or a pulse from here about direction for them.
Right now, we're at 2, 5, 10. I'd love to see us stay at 2, 5, 10 and let them renew at 10, provided there's,
They can.
right.
They can.
They can keep it at 10?
Once someone
Yeah.
obtains a 10-year license, then when they
Okay.
renew, they renew
But-
for that 10-year period.
But I
Yes.
do agree with the superintendent that whether they went back to a graduate program, they got a master's degree, or they go to a national board, I mean, that's accomplished. That's beyond what other teachers are doing. There ought to be a recognition to incentivize them to do that.
I agree, 2, 5.
And 10.
I would agree.
2, 5, and
2,
10.
5, and
All right.
10?
I'd agree with that.
All right, so we'll kind of do the 2, 5, and 10. All right, next piece. That was the license, okay, addition by testing.
Oh, sorry. You might have done what I just did, which was looking for fine arts to be at the top. And the reason that I actually titled this slide addition by testing is that is really the larger issue with the fine arts comments. We currently do not allow fine arts to be one of the areas that you can add through testing alone. So if you are licensed in math, can you add fine arts by taking the content assessment only? Currently, you may not do that. REPA 3, as currently proposed, would allow current teachers to add fine arts as a content area just through testing. The bulk of the comments that we received, several hundred, did not want it to be added through testing alone. To summarize, and I'd recommend that you go through and read at least some of the comments. The concern is that to ensure that the folks who are providing the instruction can model it and not just have the knowledge to pass the test. There were a couple of comments that requested that it be allowed to be added through testing alone. So,
Andrea?
Well, in my mind, that just sort of affirms the need for the adjunct, because I'm thinking of that experienced artist, say a Nancy Noel, and the way to get her in the classroom is to give her an adjunct permit and say, go at it. So if we don't do the testing change, I certainly think it speaks to the need for the adjunct in the fine arts. I think the fine arts is one of the best areas for the adjunct, in fact.
So what are people's feelings about testing for, additional testing for art, fine arts?
Well, this says quite.
Yeah, I know,
this
hundreds.
Says quite a bit to me, actually, and I think the thing that I'm wrestling with, when we keep bringing up the adjunct faculty permit is that we already have that pathway. It's not like it doesn't exist, it's there. I mean, you can, if you're an artist and you wanna come in, you can go get a permit. You do have to go through transition teaching. I think the question for the board is if we want to remove any kind of formal preparation, that's all I see that the adjunct faculty permit does. It basically says anybody can teach. I'm not personally comfortable with that without some criteria. I mean, there's a reason why we have an essential pedagogy tied to TTT. We've said you probably know how to control kids in the classroom. You probably have to know how to actually transfer knowledge and skills. So I think this says it to me right here. I'm comfortable leaving it right where we got it. That's me.
So, yes,
Can
Sarah?
I ask a question just for clarity? In an earlier meeting when we had discussed this, and it's been some time ago now, we had gone through and we removed several of those areas that are listed as originally proposed there. I know high ability was one. I know we had talked about some of the English as a new language, the special education. I'm confused by the fact that they're back in there. I get that it says the originally proposed. I just am unsure why they're there at this point.
In REPA 2, which I said I wasn't going to bring up.
Sorry, I don't mean to force you to do anything like that.
But
Sarah?
in the REPA 2 rulemaking, you could take a test and add those additional areas just by testing.
Right.
But before, when the board looked at final language for REPA 2, they responded to public comment on that and put back the requirement that you needed to have a program of coursework to add those areas to your license, not just have the test. So now, and so that language was the basis of the draft of REPA 3 that you're looking at.
Right.
So the only change between REPA that we have currently now and REPA 3 is just that REPA 3 would allow the fine arts area to be added by testing.
That was one that was not excluded in that dialogue. I think you're recalling, Sarah. Fine arts wasn't one of them that was taken out.
Right, I just want to make sure that in that, I understand we're talking about fine arts now. I want to make sure that in whatever format we're looking here, and I apologize, I'm not in the right spot on the spreadsheet here, but I want to make sure that those other areas that had previously been taken out are not in the current format.
They're not.
They're not.
They require coursework
Okay.
to add to the license.
Got it. Thank you.
You're correct. David?
Point of clarification, there are other certificates that we offer that by taking the test, you can add it on to your license. Is that correct?
There are. In fact, all the other teaching content areas, except the ones that you see listed up here, can be added to an existing teaching license by passing the test. And I pulled data this morning before I came over. Since January the 1st of 13, so within about the last 14, 15 months, we have added 2,437 content areas to teachers' licenses where they just passed the content test to add a new area to their license. So it's been a very popular way for teachers to expand the areas on their license.
So for me, it's a conceptual question. Do we believe that you should be able to add a license to your current certificate via passing the test? That's the broader conceptual question. Once we answer that, if we think it is, then this is an easy question. If we want to be consistent, yes, we should do it. If we don't believe it's good practice to do that, then we need to not do this and reverse all the other certificates.
Well, it's a quasi thing, because really what was passed is that they believed, yes, you could take a test and add to your licensing in these areas. And then these other areas listed up here, as Sarah just noted, it was deemed, no, it's not appropriate to just pass a test and become a special ed teacher. It's not appropriate to become, take a test and any of these other areas over here that listed. Fine arts was not decided upon, I guess, so to speak, at the last time, and so it's still here to be decided. Can you add a fine arts degree by just passing a test, or does it really require, you know, the training pieces in order to add that to your license?
So as a follow-up, we're not gonna revisit all those other
No.
certificates? Okay, so that's a done deal.
Only
So-
fine arts.
Only fine arts, okay.
So
that
I
helps.
hear some consensus that, you know, we think fine arts should not be on this list to be test only.
I would feel more comfortable in the arts if there was a portfolio assessment.
No.
That makes more sense to me if you're an artist or a musician or whatever it may be. I know it'd be a nightmare to have a group of people trying to review
That
thousands
is part of
photos.
becoming an art teacher, though.
Correct.
It
And that
is.
makes more sense to
It
me.
is.
If it said portfolio review, I'd be
No.
really excited about that.
This is a,
Logistically, I don't know how the department,
right.
right, I'll come down here an extra 2 weeks and do that too. But I don't feel comfortable with a written test for an artist. I'd rather see portfolio, so
Okay, so we kind of have some general consensus on that. All right, what's next? Health and PE. We did not receive very many comments on this area.
We didn't, but.
And there's a little history on this, because it was combined at one point, and then it was separated, and now it's being recommended to be combined again.
Yes, and while we didn't receive a lot of comments, I've always told everyone, and the legal standard is you only need one comment, and quantity is not always an indicator that it's the most important or least important. So you only received a few comments, but this is a significant matter for the board to consider. Under the proposed language for REPA 3, health and PE would be combined, and what we currently have has those as separate areas. The comments that we received recommended that they remain separate as they currently are. And one thing that I would recommend the board to consider on this matter is, as we talk about being able to add content areas to a license, if this were combined, then it would not be possible to add health only to a license or add PE only to a license. Someone would have to take a content test that covers both of those areas, and they are significantly different areas.
And so you can currently add to your license with a test, PE and health,
Yes.
separately?
Separately.
Okay.
We have had separate licenses for PE and health since 2002.
Okay.
And we have a lot of individuals who maybe had PE and they took the health license and had health for their license, or vice versa. You know, in previous iterations of the rules, like under Rule 46, 47, PE and health were a combined area. But they have been separate now for a dozen years. And those separate areas can be added as separate.
So to align, I want to clarify, so to align with our assessment of adding additional licensing to your license, they should remain separate if you want full alignment.
Well, if you want individuals to be able to add one of these
Add them
content
separately.
areas and not the other,
Yes.
then you would want them to be separate content areas.
Okay. Well, that
What would you
makes
say
sense
are
to
the,
me.
what would you say are, I'm sorry,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
what would you say are the pros and cons to separating them and combining them?
I think you need to look at the comments, public comments. Right now, you have university programs that are developed to train teachers separately in health and PE. I mean, really, to follow the program standards separately. If you were to combine them, the universities would be having to redesign their curriculum for those program areas. We would be looking at revising our standards, because right now we have separate standards rather than combined standards. And it would impact the development of our licensure exam program. Right now, we have licensure exams for those separate
Separate.
areas. So we would be working with a testing company and have to develop.
Do we know how this one came about? Was there some groundswell to do this, or do we know how this even came about? Okay.
Can they, I'm sorry,
Go ahead, Brad.
can they add the health and testing? So
Yes.
why not just leave it, just let them add it for testing?
Yeah, I say just
I
leave them
agree.
separate. We don't have to redo everything
Can I
else.
say one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Isn't it common sense, sometimes we need to use common sense, that we wouldn't have math and biology together, right? Health and PE are two different roles within schools. So maybe we can cut to the chase and just say they are different roles in schools and they should be kept separate.
Yeah. All right, there's some direction. The next one, dyslexia. So I'm going to put a little context to this, and you can add to it if you wish. But it was a few years back in which we actually took out the licensing for reading. Is that correct?
We eliminated the license for reading specialist,
Yes.
which was a license that allowed people to supervise and oversee reading programs in districts. We still have a reading content area for teachers that they can have on.
Okay, and so this particular piece on dyslexia really speaks to the pedagogical training that the teachers might get at the higher education level, and not speak necessarily to licensure.
That's one way to approach it.
Yes.
That being said, and what I'm wondering is, because this is an area of concern. I'm seeing more and more that Ohio is taking legislative action on it, and I would rather not see that here. I'd rather see the state board be able to offer some guidance on it that's maybe a workable solution. Here's my thought. We have a requirement right now, I believe, for example, in elementary, you have to have 6 hours of reading, right? Is there any way that you could craft language that just simply says that the reading program affirm that basically we look at this area of dyslexia, including the ability to help a candidate understand how to intervene when they're having phonological issues at the beginning and know what kind of reasonable interventions to take? That seems like it wouldn't require an act of Congress, but it would just ensure that the reading block covers that.
And I guess I will maybe defer to those who are writing this, but to actually use the term dyslexia is more of a diagnosis of a specific reading. But it's used in many cases in a very broad definition to include all reading deficiencies. Yeah, I was trying to think of the word, deficiencies. And so I just want to be sure that if we do anything with this, because this was recommended to be in addition to what we see in REPA 3. This is not currently in REPA 3. It's not addressed in any way. I wanted to point out that we took away, reading specialist licenses a few years back, and I have my own personal biases about having done that because, reading is like vital. So I want to see reading specialists in our schools, and I want to see reading specialists who have knowledge about how to work with children who have dyslexia. So I see a strong need for a reading specialist license. I don't know why it was removed a few years back or what the issue was with that. I have a strong desire to see something in here with reading, but I don't necessarily see it being tied to that term, dyslexia.
We would not tie it to the term, and the bulk of the public comments that we received offered specific language, such as what bullet 2 provides. But we would be happy, and we could put it with the SBRR language. The
In a little
scientific
different way.
That's exactly.
Okay.
The superintendent's described exactly what I'm talking about. I don't think it should be seen, I don't think it would be appropriate. I think, though, it is reasonable to say, and same way we say that your reading program should align to SBRR, there should be some inclusionary language about it, because I 1 out of 5.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on that topic? Next. Administrator licenses. We've got the building level. We have principals and superintendents. Are they both here on the same slide, or?
I separated them out, and I separated them also on your table of contents because, especially with the building level administrator licenses, I believe we've had 2 main types of comments. You had comment to not lower the degree requirement from the master's to the bachelor's degree. And then you also had comments that regarded the years of teaching experience required. And I think there was a little bit of general misunderstanding in the public about what currently exists and what has previously existed in terms of the required numbers of years of teaching. So, because people would say, why are you lowering it from 3 to 2, or why are you lowering it from 5 to 2? And I think that one thing is we probably need to clarify, in case any of our board members also think that, because there was definitely a very powerful understanding out there that it previously was 3 or 5, but it's 2, and it's been 2 since 2002. And I'll look to Risa, but prior to that it was 3 years of experience, and I think that went all the way back to...
Yeah, I think it was 3 a long time.
Horace Mann got his principal license with 3 years.
It would be the board's discretion to increase it from 2, but that would be a change. That the 2 years teaching, 2 years prerequisite is not a change with REPA 3 that has existed since 2002. But there were a lot of comments recommending that it be 3 or 5. And then the other piece is the degree requirement.
I just feel like teachers have evaluations, and I fully believe in them. They're there to make us better teachers. But in order to have an effective evaluation, I need an administrator who can effectively evaluate me. And they can't do that without some experience and without some educational background in doing evaluations in the process. And so
I agree. It becomes a risk management concern for me for a school when you're saying a bachelor's degree is enough and you can start running a building. I mean, there are a number of people sitting around this table that hold principal's license, and some that hold principal's and superintendent's license. And having been there, done that, I just there's no way to support seeing that change. I'd like to see it left at where it's at REPA 1, and I'll save my comment on superintendents unless we want that now or not. But
Andrea?
I have a question.
I want to make sure I understand REPA 1. Someone who has an MBA or someone who has a master's from SBOE, are they currently eligible to go and get an administrator's license?
They would be if they also completed the coursework for building level administration. The
So
building
they-
level administration requirement is a master's degree and completion of the preparation program.
So they'd have to go back and get that at an education school? So I'd like to see the flexibility to hire someone who has another form of management experience, and again, give the school system the flexibility. If there's somebody amazing out there who's got that MBA or been through a public administration program, which I think would give you comparable skills to the educator field, I'd prefer to see some more flexibility.
I think we've been working really hard in Indiana to be sure that our principals programs and our administrator programs are as robust as we can possibly make them, getting their master's degrees and getting the degrees, and including, being a good evaluator and including all the pieces that we need to do. And I would hate to water that down in any way. So, my preference is that we keep it as it is in REPA 1. And Carrie, I don't really like the 2 years only, to be a building administrator. To me, a lot of times when I would have an administrator that only had 2 years in the classroom, they just didn't really want to teach in the first place. It was like a stepping stone to just be in an administrative level already. And that's how it was viewed most of the time. So, I don't know that, I didn't agree when we went down to the 2. So, that being said, but I definitely want our leaders to have the master's degrees and the licensing pieces and courses that we've got in place. And if nothing else, I want to add more rigor to it. I don't want to lessen it in any way.
And just to be clear, I mean, that master's degree does not have to be in education. I mean, I have seen, we've done it at IWU, and I've seen other universities do it where you take your approved program and you make it the major to an MBA.
Yes.
There's not, the only thing stopping that is the university versus choosing not to do it. So, I mean, the flexibility is there to do it. If the same-sex classes become the major to a different master's, that can happen now.
Question, would that, the MBA candidate, would they still have to have 2 years of teaching experience?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's the rub. I'm not supporting that. I'm
Right.
just,
Right. The three,
because of
it's basically three
transparency,
requirements.
it's, to answer Andrea's question, it's not, you get an MBA, which is in a sense a master's degree, you can't just do it. You still have to have 2 years of teaching experience, and if you have an MBA, probably doesn't, that person will not have it. But I'm supporting REPA 1 on this matter.
There actually are a couple of institutions that are developing programs that are combined building principles
Right.
program and MBA.
Right.
So they're actually melding those programs at a couple of institutions. So we have a
So I hear some direction to kind of keep REPA 1 in language. Next. We kind of have gone through the district as well, or do you want to say something different about the district, Brad?
I had a comment on this one, because I actually engaged Michelle in this conversation, because my concern with even what I saw happen with the legislation, dropping it down to masters, it's going to create confusion. That being said, I also understand at the district level, having been in central office, the idea behind the temporary district was you have somebody out there who really did not come from an educational pathway that may be an exceptional leader. And I would argue, having been a principal in central office, as superintendents in big districts particularly, it is about leadership. So here's what I'm wondering. I don't want to see the EDS removed, but I'm wondering on the temporary if there could be some language looked at, or to see if other states have done this, where they have a temporary permit, where after, say, three years of successful leadership at that role of superintendent, that they can convert it into the superintendent's license rather than staying temporary. I'm wondering if that would get at what we're trying to do, which is create pathways. Because here's my big concern. The person who's out there that can do that is the exception and not the norm. And it is a different level of training to be a sitting superintendent than, say, it is to be a building principal. But I would also acknowledge that being a district superintendent, a lot of it is about your ability to lead. And so there are a lot of leaders trained in a lot of alternative ways. But in Indiana, we've got districts that are rural. Like when I was at Twin Lakes, it was myself and the superintendent. We did it all. When I went to Muncie, there was 12 of us in central office, probably too many. But my point is that if you, all of a sudden you drop it down, you could actually underprepare somebody depending on the size of the district they're asked to go lead in. So I like the concept of the EDS staying, but the flexibility is already there in REPA with the temporary district administrator license. All you would need to do is create a little bit of language saying that if you're in that, if you come in that way and that board says we're going to do it, we want you, and you issue a temporary, if they've led for 3 years successfully and they're doing a good job, I don't know what more they're going to learn other than keep adding to the leadership experience. So that might be a way to get at that. It's just a suggestion. I would be open to looking at some language, but otherwise I don't want to see the ES change.
I think the temporary, maybe I might be wrong. I thought the temporary building level, the licensing of the temporary place, that's in REPA 1 already.
It is.
But they also then had to make a commitment. The superintendent piece is, the building level is not. And so this is asking for the building level to be temporary? I didn't think so.
No, I'm talking about the district temporary. It is, they basically can't go anywhere with it. It is, as I understand the temporary district, they are limited to the district in which it's been issued. So I'm saying, go ahead, Risa.
Okay,
Well, because
there's a couple, I'm getting confused.
Okay,
so
sorry.
I need a little clarification. There is language in REPA 3 to also create a temporary building.
I'm not talking about
You're
that.
not talking about that.
I'm on this one
You're
right
talking
here.
about the temporary superintendent's
Correct.
license. Okay.
And I'm trying to see us not lose the EDS level. I want to see, for the
a full
for the
license.
masses.
Okay.
But what I've heard, and I've heard this from other folks, is that so you can issue a temporary district license now, but it's non-transferable. And the argument has been is if I've already done it for 3 years, why can't I convert that temporary license into superintendent's license? Why do I have to go back per se and keep adding? And I'm just saying it's something I would be open to looking at, because unless I'm misunderstanding the current rule leaves it as a temporary license. Is that right? It's non-transferable temporary license
Right.
to that district
Not
only.
portable, right.
But if I'm just saying, I'm sure you could probably come up with some language that said, if I can show you that for 3 years in a row I've done a successful job as a superintendent superintendent, I can then convert it into a regular superintendent's license, is all I'm saying, without changing the EDS.
Although
It's
for
an
those
idea.
individuals, they might only have a master's. For the ones that convert, the ones who use that path to get a superintendent's
I agree.
license might
I-
still only
I
have a
agree.
And
master's.
currently,
I agree.
they would have to go and get an EDS.
Right.
To get a full license.
But
Correct.
But not with what I'm proposing. Because what I'm saying is, I come to you and I have a master's degree. You've issued me a temporary license. 3 years go by and I've led my district successfully. I still have a master's degree. I'm saying, I'm asking for language to look at that would create the ability for me to apply for my superintendent's license. I'm still compliant with statute, because the statute now says master's, right?
He's wanting to expand the temporary
I want to expand the scope of the temporary to give them
Temporary
a pathway to convert it to a normal
superintendent.
Right,
license.
it's not statutory,
Without changing
it's
the EDS.
rule, it's in the rule.
Okay.
So
You get
now,
the concept?
yeah, David?
Current law regarding superintendency of the degree, it's master's degree or higher.
Current regulation requires an EDS for superintendents.
I would like to put it on the list to at least look at that issue and have a broader discussion with my colleagues about having a master's degree or higher, rather than requiring an EDS
And that's what's currently proposed
in REPA 3.
in
Yes.
REPA 3.
Okay.
But
And
current
I don't
reg-
want to lose that all, is what I'm saying, to put on the list that I think that needs broader discussion.
So we might discuss this one at another time.
Yeah,
What are your other thoughts?
We're getting to the point where we're not going to have a quorum in about
I
10
know.
minutes, so I just want to get it onto your list.
I just echo those comments. I mean, I'm conceptually supportive, but want to have a further discussion.
All right, so do we have any other items?
If we could quickly talk about virtual instruction. The REPA 3 proposes the addition of a new content area on virtual instruction. We received just a few comments regarding this additional content area, largely favorable, but there were some questions for additional clarification about what that would look like. Does that mean if you are one of the schools that does e-learning days, does that mean all of those teachers would need this content area? Would it be phased in? Questions like that. So it was just for those areas in which the public sought additional clarification, including some of the comments from individuals at our institutions of higher ed. I thought it would be useful to hear from the board if we want
So
to.
why don't we kind of put that on our homework list to kind of look at the comments on that, and perhaps you might follow up with some things that you feel might need to be addressed in that area to make it viable.
We received comments. Other states'
okay.
programs. and this.
Currently, when we look at reciprocity for individuals who have completed teacher ed programs in other states and they come to Indiana to get licensed, we accept their approved teacher prep programs from other states, but we do not accept any licensure exams that they may have had to take to receive licenses in their state. Instead, we give them a one-year license and we make them take our Indiana licensure test. There were comments received that would, that suggest that in order to promote reciprocity and mobility for teachers, that if individuals have completed an approved teacher ed program in another state and they have passed licensure tests in that state, that when they come to Indiana to be licensed, that we accept their test, their programs and their tests in other states for Indiana licensure, rather than making them then duplicate testing by taking our test as well. So,
And I would say there's one area in which that's a really big shame, and that would be National Board Certified teachers. That we don't even accept National Board Certified teachers from other states, and make them go through all of the licensing pieces that are happening here in Indiana.
Well, if you go to Illinois and try to get a license, you're going to have to pass the state history of Illinois test to make it work. So, and if you go to Arizona, you have to pass the state Arizona test. So the requirement of them passing and doing that is a choice that they make when they choose to come to Indiana.
And I agree with that simply. I think they should have to take the Indiana test. Maybe our rigor is better than the other state that comes to us.
I mean, there are requirements, and if you've looked at going to other states, you will know that. So, I mean, you're gonna have, it's in every state, it's not just in ours.
Any other areas?
Visiting, yes. Visiting teacher permits. These are permits that we issue to individuals who are foreign, who are in our country, on visas. Many school districts are hiring, visiting teachers to re-energize their world language program. Like we have a number of individuals who are visiting teachers who are licensed in Chinese or, whatever. We also have a number of visiting teachers who are here teaching physics, STEM areas, a lot of science and math individuals. One of the issues with the way REPA is written right now is that if an individual comes to us and let's just say it's a person, it's a Chinese teacher, they come to us and they were licensed in China to teach physics. They come here and a school district would like to hire them to teach Mandarin Chinese. The way the rule is written now, we have no way of testing their proficiency in their native language so that we can put their native language on the license. And so we would suggest that you allow us to draft some language that would provide that those individuals can do oral proficiency testing in their native language so that they can also be hired to teach their native language in school districts, because that's difficult right now.
I mean, they would need to be proficient in English enough to communicate with the students or use these words.
And visiting teachers do have
They
to
are.
have English proficiency
They are.
as well. I think that's a great idea.
Take the test in English and perform well. Then how are you going to be able to teach English speaking students?
Well, most of them are already fluent
No.
in English, and also, you can teach them through pure immersion, particularly the higher levels. If you're teaching French 11, those kids shouldn't be speaking English anyway. French 3 in high school, shouldn't be speaking English anyway. So you can have a foreign language teacher not speak any English in an immersion class, and they're fine.
Obviously, we're going with the physics exam. So
Oh, they don't have to sit for
we
the
don't want them to
exam.
teach physics,
well, that was the example.
well, maybe if they
So
can speak
1
English,
year.
sure.
It's 1
Go
year.
ahead and explain what the process is now,
3 years.
Risa.
An individual applying for a visiting teacher permit has to have demonstrated proficiency in English in order to be able to be in the classroom. What we don't have a way to do now, and we license them in the area that they either have a major on their transcript, their college transcript, or that they had an area on their license in their home country. But school districts really, for world languages, really want to use those individuals to teach their world language programs because they're native speakers. And right now, our visiting teacher permit language doesn't allow us, it doesn't have an avenue for us to let them do OPI, oral proficiency testing, in order to have that world language area on their license. So the schools want to use them now, but since they don't have that area on their license, they're not considered highly qualified, they're not, it's an issue.
So we're really just wanting flexibility to be
And-
able to
and
do
we-
that.
We'd like to be able to provide some language in the rule, a way for that to happen.
Go for it.
Sounds good.
Write it up.
Thank you. That was near to my heart.
And that really
We work with that a
covers-
lot.
Yeah. That really covers the main, no, we didn't do.
Temporary, we didn't do temporary.
I think we're gonna bring the temporary building and the superintendent's building back to us. The temporary
I don't
license.
know, did we get
Yeah,
guidance from
we were to the
you
point
on
where we were gonna
temporary
bring that
delay?
conversation back to us to talk about again.
Okay.
And Brad wanted us to do
Yeah, the temporary for the superintendents and the temporary for the building.
So just two more topics. One, early childhood. We had a couple of comments that recommended that we have the content requirements align with the NAEYC standards. The comment, if you flip to it, you will see it wasn't specific to say why or what the differences were, but I wanted to flag it for your attention for additional consideration to see if that's something that you want to look at more thoroughly, if you want us to look at it and give you a compare contrast, or if that's already happened. But that is an area that we received some comments. And I put on the slide the current early childhood curriculum requirements. We do believe that our standards are currently relatively aligned.
Correct. That's what I was going to say. I don't think this is a big stretch.
Just
Is it worthwhile then to do a quick analysis? Have staff do it to be sure they are aligned?
There's already a chart, so
Yeah, I
we
believe
can
it's
send that.
already
But and
Okay, if
after
it's-
we send that, if you want more, since it looks like we'll be discussing it again in
Sure.
April.
It's yes or no, either
Yeah,
it's
that'll
aligned
be-
or it's not.
yeah.
So if it's aligned, just a quick memo, we did check and it's aligned.
And this, just quickly, dual credit, we received a couple of comments that recommended that in order to teach dual credit, an individual should hold at least a master's degree.
I know.
What do we got going on here? Oh,
Isn't, right now, the teach dual credit, isn't that you have to go through some kind of program and get certified by whether it be, see, like yes, we have to go through a school that partners with us to get the dual credit at our school. And we have to meet the criteria of whoever you partner with.
and that's how it's been regulated.
And I think that's an excellent way of monitoring it, and then we don't have to monitor it.
And so the suggestions were to increase the dual credit licensures to a master's requirement? I mean, that's what I'm reading here.
Yes.
And that makes sense to me because it actually helps the universities to be able to come behind a high school teacher and basically recognize them as an adjunct. I think that's where I was headed. Maybe that's part of the solution to the STEM is. In other words, so if I'm a university,
Well, that's
and
an interesting approach.
I think that's where it's going. If I'm a university and I have a partnership with a high school and they've got a high school science teacher and I want to be able to use that high school science teacher as the dual credit teacher, they would need to have either 18 credit hours or a master's degree, and maybe that's where it's going. I don't know. So I'm looking at the university people if I'm totally wacky on that, but I think that might be where it's heading.
And if I could,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know what it's
No.
talking about. We haven't
if I
looked
could
at it.
quickly tell you, there is a typo I just noticed. I listed comments 850 and then it says 72. That's comment 272.
Okay.
Just so if you want to refer back to, I just know who made
Thank
the
you.
comment, and so I remember it was comment 272.
We'll be doing that tonight.
We're impressed, Michelle. We're impressed.
Yeah.
We're impressed.
So that really covers all of the major areas. We have some guidance, and it sounds like this will at least be another 2 steps. Well, we will bring some language at the next meeting and get additional guidance, and then assuming we still have an action item, it sounds like, but assuming that is not successful, then we will bring some language, have additional discussion, and then plan for another meeting on REPA.
All right, so now before us, thank you, the dialogue was robust. So now we have action, and Tony, I think you wanted to bring forth some action regarding rulemaking on REPA 3.
I like action. Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess maybe I should just ask preliminarily, does the department want to continue with rulemaking?
You're asking me personally?
Yeah.
My answer would be yes.
Am I right?
We need to put rulemaking over to the board. That's the first thing we have to do. That's almost
That's
the
gonna
full
go-
reason we're doing
that-
rulemaking to begin with.
That is going to be, if
Am-
the department wants to continue with rulemaking, I have no.
Am I glad that we had some good conversation about some pieces I don't approve of? Yes. So I'm also I'm also feeling good about that. So, all right. So are you not going to make your motion?
No.
Okay.
He's getting ready to
All
have
right.
his dinner.
So we have just two quick items. We're talking 5 minutes at the most. HEA 1005 update, Danielle. I don't think we even have anything in writing, do we?
No, not at all.
All right.
I can make something up if you want to stay longer. So quickly, as promised, a monthly update on 1005. Two things today, a few about AccuPlacer. We've had 85,000 test units delivered out to the schools. That equates to approximately 45,000 students have taken AccuPlacer since the window opened. It will remain open until April 25th. We are working on getting guidance out to the schools, just reminding them about the remediation that follows and about the parent communication that needs to exist if in fact the AccuPlacer shows that they are not on track to meet their grad plan or are in need of remediation. We are working on a survey as well to find out about this pilot. How did this go on this large scale change? So that survey will also be coming out as they finish up testing. And then 1005, believe it or not, has a lot of other parts to it besides AccuPlacer. There are other parts of it we will be bringing forth. The most timely of one, I just want to get you ready for next month. The language in 1005 reads, the State Board of Education, in consultation with the Department of Education, shall develop criteria to be used by the department to identify schools with the highest graduation waiver rate percentages in Indiana. Those schools may require the establishment of a school-wide remediation plan. So we will be bringing forth next month some recommendation for what that criteria. We're looking at the current data over the last couple of years. What is the average school? What is the waiver bin, the waiver rate bin? And then we'll have some ideas for you. But just to make you aware, there's some other parts of 1005, and we'll be bringing that forth.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have a accountability systems review panel update. Deb Daly and Molly. No problem. Hi, Deb.
Hello. Good
And I
afternoon,
believe
Board.
we have your information.
You do. You've actually received a memo concerning the accountability panel update. Out of respect for time, we won't go through the entire thing and read this. I did want to also let you know that I have a 50-page presentation, but we will not go through that today either.
Come on.
Unless you really, really want
But
to.
you know what? I think it would be good if you sent it to them.
Absolutely.
That'd be
So we will
great.
get this out to you in electronic form for further review. So just a quick summary of the last accountability panel meeting. They did convene on February 27, 2013 to continue refining the recommendations for the accountability system. Team members from CECI as well as DOE presented throughout the day. We also had both of our experts, Damian Bedebenner as well as Derek Briggs, present for presentations as well as to answer questions. Just to cover the highlights of this document, we did get into the categorical status improvement very in depth. We had the DOE and CECI presented 4 different data solutions. This information went out to the accountability panel members days in advance so that they could review the level of detail. We also went through the 50-page presentation of the summary of information. Conclusion of that essentially is that the panel felt that the B, again, if you read through the document, the B definition of categorical improvement best reflects what we were trying to capture with categorical improvement, meaning that they want to place the focus on students maintaining their current level of proficiency for those that are in the pass or pass plus category, or moving forward at least one category each year. We also recognize through Dr. Damian Bedebenner's presentation that we do have some additional work to do in the categorical improvement status component, essentially being refining the cut scores between the subcategories and determining whether or not we can provide additional subcategories in the pass band specifically. Dr. Derek Briggs spoke about the accountability system panel in general and about we asked him to actually review the recommendations and provide feedback. He spoke specifically to the scale. There had been concerns previously about adjusting the scale from a 0 to 4-point scale to a 0 to 100-point scale. Essentially, as a quick summary, he felt that that was more of an illusion than a reality, that there was an issue in making that transition, and also requested that we provide some additional data and do some additional analysis on that to confirm that 0 really is not the bottom of that scale, that really the bottom is probably going to be about 30 points or whatever is actually obtained by the schools. So in other words, the 100-point scale is somewhat of an illusion in that we really don't have schools performing in that very bottom of the category. He also spoke to weighting growth and performance, another key piece that the panel has been working on. A quick summary on that is he feels that this is a policy-driven decision. And he also commented that there should be consideration given to what resources will be made available to those schools that fall in those bottom categories. And that's a very big point of his, is that what happens next after a school is labeled an F, for example, and we want to be able to ensure that those labels that are placed on a school, that we have enough resources to support those schools and be able to do something with them. So he asked for us to give some consideration as well on how much resources we really have available for those lowest level schools. Overall, we asked him to give overall recommendations or consideration of the recommendation. You can see that some of the strengths that he pointed out was the overall ease in communication. He said it definitely has a transparency to it, has face value in all of the different components, as well as an ease and point assignment. When we say that a pass rate is translated into points, that's very easy for individuals to understand. Did have some specific concerns around growth. Again, many of the action items that we have around categorical growth came from both Damien and Dr. Briggs' feedback on this. Simplicity may cause a loss of accuracy and detail. In other words, reducing the growth data to one previous year, we may see a lot more noise or bouncing in the student status. So something for consideration that we want to review the data and see if we can compensate for that. He also stated that messaging categorical status improvement could be a challenge, meaning we need to define what it means to move up a category or to move down a category or to remain at the same category in this model. We want to be very, very clear on what that is as we're putting this information out if we're moving forward with categorical improvement status. Third one is the reliability of subcategories in the categorical model. Potential exists that schools may be rewarded or penalized for regression to the mean or luck as opposed to true growth. So in other words, the further you are away from the mean for students, the more likely you're going to see regression towards the mean. So those highest performing students, sometimes that may truly be luck on a test, and the next year when they take the test, they seem to have grown negatively or moved back a category status. That's merely regression to the mean, and it's a statistical anomaly. It's not necessarily negative growth. So we want to be sure that we're not penalizing schools for this regression to the mean. Same way at the bottom end of the spectrum, when we're looking at the lowest performing students, when they've moved up the next year, again, that may be regression to the mean rather than actually seeing growth within the student. So again, some additional things we want to keep in mind and consider as we move forward. The last note that we have on this is changes to assessment will likely result in a revision of the values and point tables for categorical improvement. In other words, this isn't one-time work. We'll likely have to revisit this a few times. One time, obviously, for ISTEP. We'll likely have to revisit this for a transition year as well, when we're looking at crossing over the assessments, and finally revisit it again once we've had a few years worth of data under the new assessment.
Thank you, Deb. Yes, Tony?
The part about the cut score sub-bands, what sub-bands are you on?
Sure. So essentially within the categorical improvement status model, we're breaking up the current 3 bands of did not pass, pass, and pass plus into more refined bands.
And I think it's being suggested currently that it be 7 bands.
Correct. We
Don't have names for them yet.
No, at this time we're referring to them as did not pass 1, did not pass 2, did not pass 3, pass 1, pass 2, pass plus 1, pass plus 2. So in other words, breaking up those larger bands into smaller bands to be able to see the smaller movements or smaller increments of proficiency.
other comments? Thank you very much, Deb, and
Thank
we'll
you.
look forward to your presentation via electronic.
Great.
SBOE updates, I forgot to, do you guys have any updates you want to give?
Just one small update that because we've had so many public comments, the governor did ask me to work with the superintendent and other members of the board to move the date of the meeting in April to approve the final college and career ready standards, to give sufficient time to the team to take into account all the public comments, now over 1,400, as well as the national evaluators with which we have entered into contracts to do a review of the next draft of standards. So we got confirmation during the meeting that the roundtable meeting is now April 21st from 12:30 to 2, and the date we'd like to propose is the 25th of April, Friday. So I've sent an email as well, but maybe we can confirm quickly if we have a quorum, so we can get that date out to folks.
So April 21 for the roundtable, 12:30 to 2,
Yes,
and April 25th for the board meeting.
and that's the proposed date. Do you have a concern, Brad?
That's the date for university graduation, so I won't be here.
Okay.
So I have a full day of stuff
Okay.
that day.
Well, then I'll try to handle the date by email. I know Andrea's got a conflict the following week. We don't want to move it out into May.
No.
So we're really looking.
What's wrong with moving it to May?
Because we have an implementation of the standards that we really need to be moving forward on, that we addressed again also today.
Right.
We want to assure the teachers that we're going to have things out to them in a very timely manner so they can begin preparation this whole next year. So, you know, we've been on the same timeline and we can meet our timeline. We just have to find a date for us to meet.
On the end of April, I could do Wednesday, but not Thursday and Friday. I'm out of town.
Okay.
I'd just like to say, I think considering that the standards debate is one of the most important things we're going to consider, that I think it's really important that all 11 that it be a day that all 11
Oh, I
attend.
think so.
Well, we could keep it on the 23rd. I'd heard from most of you that date worked. That what we were concerned about is that there are significant changes on the 21st from the roundtable. That wouldn't give the team enough time for you to see a revised version for the meeting on the 23rd. Now, when we make those available to the roundtable the previous week, we could send that version to you, and then if there's minor modifications to the roundtable, we could highlight those for you. But that was why we were trying to build in a little more time. So I'll just email you to handle logistics. I just want to let you know that it will not be the 9th of April approving standards.
But we will be having an April 9th meeting.
Yes.
And really on this second date, probably all that we will have perhaps might be the standards. Thank you very much, Claire. We don't have any items under board operations. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you. We got through it. It's like 3 months worth of work.